Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. Rule number 1, don't poke the bear. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, the end is near. You know, it's the end of the Nazi regime in Ukraine. End of the world.
Kiev woke up to a night of terrifying shelling as Russian forces launched one of the...
This is every night for them. Every night is the worst night of their life. We just heard that today. Yesterday. You mean to tell me last night was worse than the night before? Yes, the end is near.
Most devastating strikes ever seen on Ukrainian capital.
What? What did I tell y'all yesterday? Every day they're going to tell y'all, this is the worst we've ever seen. Yes, every day the sunrise is going to be the worst that they ever seen. It's over for them.
The massive coordinated attack involving 539 long-range attack drones and 11 missiles, including Kinzhal hypersonic missile, destroyed the Kiev regime's military infrastructure, a complete test of Zelensky's readiness for dialogue. The Russian aerospace forces have carried out a massive strike on Kiev's military infrastructure, and all the objectives of the operation have been fully achieved, the Russian Defense Ministry reported on Friday, July 4, 2025. The night panorama shows the Kiev city reddened by fires and covered in thick black smoke after the drone and missile procedures arrived at the objects that had been written down. According to NASA firm's fire maps, there are numerous heat trails on the most sensitive objects, hit by explosions accompanied by heavy fires inside the city, made the night like in a hell.
This can all stop.
One of the main ones, Kiev International Airport and the area where Patriot defense system is deployed, has been reached and shows traces of fire. Patriot batteries and other air defense batteries that are continuously supplied by the U.S. are known to be located at the airport. Patriots failed to help Ukraine defend itself, once again exposing the weakness of U.S. and European air defenses, just as Israeli Iron Dome failed to stop Iranian missiles. In the vicinity of Zelyony, Civil Aviation Plant number 410, which produces kamikaze UAV, was burning. Above it, the military technology company Tektiagaz and the Aviarobotnik Garage Cooperative were engulfed in flames. Other prominent targets were Ukrainian Security Service Academy, Patriot Battery in Vasilev, and Antonov Plant. The strikes hit enterprises including a facility in Kiev dedicated to the production of drones, FPV systems, and other military equipment, military airfield infrastructure, and oil refinery, and what was left of it was badly damaged.
We want all this to go away.
Morning coffee has become more bitter for Kiev every time Russia destroys enemy military objects, and in adding response to Zelensky's attacks on civilians in Donetsk and Luhansk in recent days. Thick smoke still covered the capital in the morning, 4 hours after the arrival of the most massive and spectacular Russian fire.
See, when it's thick smoke just all over the capital of Ukraine, you can't hide this nightmare from the people. Western media cannot hide this terror that's right. Oh, as soon as after Trump got off the phone with Putin, man, Putin don't give a damn about Trump. I thought Trump was going to be able. Is Trump here to surrender? I mean, what's going on? Why is he talking to Putin? This won't stop till Zelensky surrender.
Severe air pollution, railway disruptions, and the collapse of the transportation system have been reported. Thus, the calculation against Kiev by drones and missiles shows that decadent NATO and the West will not be able to defeat Russia.
People can't breathe over there, man. Come on, let's do the right thing, bro. You know, it don't get no better. That probably was the best of what happened to him. Let's see. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we got some more. Cause we got to see footage. I mean, CNN and MSNBC, they just won't bring us the real news we can use. We want to see what happened. What happened now? Ooh, yeah. Damn, they were trying to hide in that building.
In the town of Poltava, a TCC building was shocked by several powerful explosions, the target blasts by Russian uranium UAV. Separately, it is noted that DVR are now banned in Ukraine, but the footage from the morning of July 3rd was not only very successful, but also very rare. The footage shows the moment when 3 uranium drones spectacularly attacked their target one by one against the TCC building, as the Ukrainian Territorial Recruitment and Social Support Center, which manages military records and mobilization efforts of the armed forces of Ukraine.
Nobody died. Please.
The air defense did not respond.
We know the people in that building recruiting, trying to raise up an army. This is very devastating. CNN, why y'all trying to hide this? If I go to CNN right now, none of this A1 footage.
And the attacks by drones were carried out precisely, showing an idea of how geraniums work in a swarm. They simultaneously attack the target. Geraniums came from different directions, and from a height of 60 to 70 meters, flying horizontally, the next one dived from the clouds vertically, and all reached their goal at the same time. In any case, the Russian armed forces clearly practice various algorithms and schemes of action with such leading products as geranium in the swarm, as well as interspecies and combined attacks with X-101, Caliber and Iskander. As a result, further footage shows damage to the TCC building complex after the Russian geraniums arrived. According to preliminary reports, at least 12 mobilized soldiers were eliminated. More than 20 others were injured with varying severity. Apparently, the Russians first attacked the TCC, where people who were forcibly seized on the streets by TCC representatives who were prepared to go to the front line. As in the footage last month, hunting down men in Poltava region in the Brelka district, running over a man and breaking his leg, but he was still sent to the front line on NATO's orders, because Ukraine is severely short of personnel. A woman who was filming and commenting said that she had lost her husband in the war. What kind of situation for mobilized Ukrainian soldiers could there be on the front line? A captured soldier said a lot about the dire situation within the armed forces of Ukraine, as shown in footage on July 3rd, released by the Russian Defense Ministry.
Приезжали тоже, наверное, типа покупатели только именно от этого 425-го ОШП. Брали себе людей. Тыкают, чтобы брал вещи и на выход. Ночью погрузили всех в тентованную машину, вывезли еще в одно село. Там не было чем дышать, очень тесно, и аж оттуда, и аж в Сумскую область. Везде было охраняемо, вплоть до того, что до растяжек. Там парень вошел в лес и рвануло. Ну, может, учебно, я не буду утверждать, что там, но ему доской щеку черкануло, пробило. У нас все парни, что были там, все парни были такие, как я, наловленные. Какая там может быть обстановка, если людей забрали, там еще помоложе бы я, а тут молодые люди, тоже такая ситуация, повырывали из семей. Понимаю, задача, наверное, была дойти. Просто на том же месте, где зашли, просто там и полягали.
My friends, today we're going to talk about Russia's summer offensive. You're probably wondering where the Russians are going to attack and what we can expect in the following weeks. Hint, there's this massive Russian bulge between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka ready to burst out. And according to the latest news, Russia just launched a new offensive north of Kharkiv Oblast. More on that new DLC map at the end of the video.
So it begins.
Anyway, you know it's a bad omen when Zelensky finally shows up with a suit. Yo! Russia's summer campaign is being presented by the mainstream media as one last push to break Ukrainian morale. It's funny, they really expect the Russians to just rage quit this war. In reality, Russian forces are slowly and continuously grinding forward from one season to another. As part of this strategy, the Russian Army Command is waging a terrible war of attrition on the AFU and doesn't want to let the Ukrainians off the hook. To fuel this machinery, President Vladimir Putin admitted that the Russian army is recruiting between 50 to 60,000 volunteers each month. In comparison, Ukraine can only mobilize half this amount of troops. In terms of casualties in recent months, Russia loses about 4,250 soldiers KIA every 30 days, plus another estimated 8,500 severely wounded, for under 13,000 irrecoverable losses every month. That means a net surplus of up to 37 to 47,000 men. Now, as for Ukrainian losses, all we know is that the Ukrainians cannot hold on to their fortifications like they used to in the past. Because of that, the Russian army is accelerating its gains in 2025, with June being the worst month for Ukrainians in terms of territorial losses this year, with 556 square kilometers lost. But thanks to CNN, we can learn that Russia's summer offensive in Ukraine underwhelms. This numerical advantage allows Russian armed forces to replenish battered assault detachments and continuously be on the offensive across the entire front. Extending the area of operations is important. If the Russians were to attack on a concentrated front, Ukrainian drones, artillery units, and their reserves would all be concentrated as well. In that case, Russian casualties would become enormous. But if the Russians spread out and disperse their attacks, suddenly Ukraine has to do the same thing for its own assets. That's how gaps appear and breakthroughs are made possible. That's why although the Russian armed forces have main axes of attack, they also carry on operations on secondary fronts, or even go as far as to open new fronts like we've seen in Sumy Oblast. It's all part of the same idea of the war of attrition. But before we continue, a quick word from today's sponsor. If you want to express your ideas through videos like I do, you should check out InVideo AI. After seeing what it's capable of, it's obvious to me why InVideo AI has over 10 million users across the world. And with the exciting InVideo AI version 3 upgrade, you can create stunning, full-length videos irrespective of your skill level, and without having to learn difficult programs from scratch. Let me walk you through how it's done. Just start with a simple text prompt, and it creates the first draft for you. For example, create a 30-second video about the war between Russia and Ukraine. Check out what InVideo AI produced after only a few minutes.
Cel wyznaczeno. Atakujemy.
T90 VPAD.
Огонь.
Drony v powietrze.
Materiałem pozycji. Majeszczyny zakończyli.
After this first draft, you can then use the edit command box to match your creative ambitions. Add subtitles, add a war with aliens, make the music more epic. Unlike traditional video tools with steep learning curves, in-video AI makes the process super easy, letting you focus entirely on your vision and ideas, become the movie director you've always wanted to be, and create anything you can think of using in-video AI's powerful generative capabilities. And the best is that you can try in-video AI for free. This will save you hundreds of dollars that you would have otherwise spent on editing, animation, and other production costs. You can check out in-video AI by clicking the link in the description below. This summer, we can expect Russia's main effort to be located at the center of Donetsk Oblast. As a reminder, it's one of the two pro-Russian separatist republics of the Donbass that Russia also annexed in September 2022. This means the conquest of Donetsk Oblast holds a very important political value for the Z Imperium. If we go back in time, we can see that the turning point was the fall of Avdiivka in mid-February 2024. Avdiivka was like a fortress, and once Russian assault detachments stormed it, they effectively broke the deadlock. Since then, because of the flat, open terrain, the Ukrainian command was unable to regain the initiative against the horde. All the attention is now centered on Pokrovsk, a fortress city that the Russians have been besieging for over 6 months. How did we even get to this point? At first, the Russian 2nd Combined Arms Army tried to outflank Pokrovsk from the west. But after Ukrainian counterattacks around Udachne, the entire offensive more or less came to a stop. It was a defensive victory for Ukraine, but the battle was not over. The screen was loading and Ukrainian soldiers were getting ready for round 2. Because on the 27th of June, Ukraine's commander-in-chief Alexander Syrsky reported that Russia is concentrating its largest group of personnel in that direction, a force numbering 110,000 troops. That's 50% more than the entire British ground forces. Let that sink in for a second. Oh yeah, remember what I said in one of my last videos about Pokrovsk. But there's a second option for the Russian army. That is to jump on the defensive mode around Pokrovsk, while they shift their focus on the eastern side of the city. From there, they could push an open field towards the large urban area of Novo-Ekonomichne, from where they could start a grinding battle, house by house, towards Pokrovsk. This is exactly what is happening right now. Just kidding, it's actually worse. At the moment, the situation is critical because between 20 and 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers are facing encirclement. Starting in May, the Russian armed forces opened the breach along the TO-504 highway and now hold a 35-kilometer salient east of Pokrovsk. We can talk of an operational masterpiece, and you'll understand why in a minute. The Russians are wielding a big bulge that they could swing in any direction. As we speak, Russian storm detachments are currently carrying a wide flanking maneuver westwards. I'll make another video with more details about this operation. But what you have to understand right now is how the Russians are not getting bogged down in street-by-street battles. Instead, they're simply bypassing these urban areas. And by doing so, they also bypass most of Ukraine's strongholds. The operational objective of this orc doctrine seems to be Rodinske. That was a situation in that sector on June 1st, plus 9 kilometers in a month. It's absolutely insane. The first step will be to take control of the Kazeny-Tariets River, as well as the villages of Raziny, Novotarietske, Mayak, and maybe even Novo-Ekonomichne. Then comes this set of industrial areas and mines that can act as tactical bulwarks for Ukraine. At last, if the Russians thrust even deeper all the way to the Golden Point, they'll reach the TO-515 road and the settlement of Radinske. I don't expect the battle to be easy, especially since the stakes are so high. But at the same time, if the Russians continue at this rate, they'll be in Radinske within a month. Why does this random village in the middle of the steppe even matter? Well, I'll tell you why. If Radinske falls, the Ukrainian garrisons of Pokrovsk and Mirnorad will be 3/4 encircled. Bakhmut 2.0, baby. Again! And that's the best case scenario. Because if the Russian 2nd Command Arms Army breaks through the Udachne-Kotline line, oh, it's gonna be bad. They could push towards the E50 road, and then it's going to be almost impossible for Ukraine to resupply Pokrovsk. And if the two pincers link up and the two tips touch, well then, such a defeat would mean the end of the war for Ukraine. But of course, we know that's not going to happen. because Ukraine will then redirect its reserves to hold the flanks. Every additional step for the Russians is going to be more and more costly. This is where the center will start giving in. Russian forces are only 4 kilometers away from the first houses of Pokrovsk. That's where we'll see a street by street, block by block urban battle until the pocket gets reduced. But don't worry, Steinchenko's counterattack will solve everything. If you thought that course of action was bad, well, it gets worse. I told you how the salient east of Pokrovsk was an operational masterpiece. It's not because it has an impressive girth. It's because not only is it threatening Pokrovsk with encirclement, but it's also threatening Kostiantynivka with encirclement. 2 for 1, brother. Take it and go. We all remember how difficult it was for Ukraine to defend Avdiivka and prevent it from being encircled. Now imagine they have 2 cities to defend. Zelensky once said, when the enemy surrounds one of your garrisons, make sure another one is also besieged. Kostiantynivka is also a bigger city. It's a big girl. Before the war, Kostiantynivka housed 80,000 people compared to 65,000 for Pokrovsk. Those 2 urban areas are approximately the size of Bakhmut. So you can imagine the intensity of the battle that's going to take place there. As of July 2025, Kostiantynivka is already in the middle of its own Kesselschlacht. About 50,000 Ukrainian troops are defending this cauldron. If we zoom in, we see that Kostiantynivka is not very far from Bakhmut, only 17 kilometers to the west. This shows how little progress was made by the Russians in this direction until now. In this sector, the Ukrainian defensive perimeter depends on 3 bulwarks: the Klebanbiske Reservoir, plus the towns of Donetsk and Chasiv. But these 2 urban areas are about to be overwhelmed. As you can see, Russia's operational objective is to take Kostiantynivka into a pincer. Now, with that being said, the fighting will be ferocious. The Ukrainians benefit from solid logistic lines centered on Kostiantynivka. In Donetsk, there's still reports of isolated Ukrainian groups operating on the outskirts of the town. And even then, Ukrainian units are also firmly holding onto Shcherbinivka, including some of their most elite formations like the Elite Police Brigade, the Presidential Brigade, and the 12th Special Forces Brigade, Azov, composed of veterans of the Battle of Mariupol. To the east, the Ukrainians are still holding on to the Siversky Donetsk Canal, but their positions are now increasingly getting flanked as a result of the Battle of Donetsk. Meanwhile, to the north in Chasiv, after over 450 days of fighting, the Russians now control slightly more than 50% of the urban area. However, it's to the west, along the TO-504 highway, that the Russians could make the most gains. That's right, the Battle of the Bulge. If Russian assault detachments advance in this direction, the Ukrainians will be squeezed out of Shcherbinivka. Thus, this will bring Russian army units within striking distance of Kostiantynivka. So overall, it's a very difficult situation for the AFU. The 70-kilometer-long Pokrovsk-Kostiantynivka front is where we should see the brunt of Russia's summer offensive. It is claimed that 110,000 Russians are deployed there, against 30,000 in Pokrovsk, 50,000 in Kostiantynivka, and 10,000 in between. 110,000 Russians against 90,000 Ukrainians.
Not great or terrible.
The question is, can Ukraine defend both these strategic cities at the same time? Personally, I think the Russian command will first concentrate on reducing the Pokrovsk salient, while pinning down as many Ukrainian units in Kostiantynivka. And once the Battle of Pokrovsk is over, Russian forces will pivot to the east towards Kostiantynivka. But, you can be reassured, because the Telegraph reported Russia's summer offensive is doomed to fail.
You just need to believe.
So we talked about the battles of Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, but there's also a lot going on in the South Donetsk direction. You have to understand that all these sectors are interconnected. For guidance, here's Pokrovsk, here's Avdiivka, and Vuhledar in the south. This was the frontline situation on the 1st of January 2025. And this is the frontline situation now. There, the Russians also advanced significantly on a 60-kilometer front. Velika Novosilka fell, Kurakhove fell, and the salient was reduced. In this area, the flat, open terrain made it impossible for the Ukrainians to recover. They had to carry never-ending fighting retreats in the steppe, escaping from one cauldron to another. So by early July, in 6 months, the Russians advanced 10 kilometers with a maximum progression of 20 kilometers. They're very close to reaching the junction between the Mokry Yali and Vovcha rivers. I'll be honest, I thought that the Russian armed forces would advance much more rapidly and that they would reach this line by December 2024. By the end of December, the Russians could have reached all the way to the Vovcha River. Okay, I got the ETA wrong, but that was the general axis of progression. So as part of this summer offensive, we can expect Russian forces to reach the Vovcha River, but we're talking about a 10 to 12 kilometer leap forward. That's a lot. Let's see how long it takes them. Could be 1 month, could be 6 months. But I think it's along the banks of the Vovcha River that the Ukrainians should be able to halt the Russians. There's this water barrier plus all the villages and forested areas that can be fortified. The Vovcha River is also very symbolic because it marks the border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. This means this will conclude Russia's South Donetsk campaign, which started in late October 2022. And it will bring Russian forces into a new oblast, Dnipropetrovsk, a region that has never been touched by the Russian army is about to be invaded. Actually, we talked about it in one of my previous videos. This is where Putin unlocked a side quest for his generals. The amazing race to the border of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Which team would get there first? Group Novotroitsky, 11.5 kilometers away, or Group Pushkine, 17 kilometers away. And for your information, it's the Pushkine grouping that won the race. Who knows, maybe they even got some financial bonus for their feat of arms. So Russia's summer offensive will consist in a sequence of operations along a 120-kilometer front, stretching from Chasiv Yar all the way to Velika Novosilka. Apart from that, can we expect Russian gains somewhere else along the eastern front? With Russia's offensive against Pokrovsk, Ukraine might be forced to weaken secondary fronts. Many mentioned a possible Russian offensive against Zaporozhye. But honestly, to me, it seems the Russians are very comfortable behind the Surovikin line. Although in the past few weeks, the Russians have launched small attacks along the Zaporozhye front, but nothing serious.
No strings attached.
I see shaping operations for a potential future offensive, but this can only start once the South Donetsk Oblast is fully conquered. And let's be honest, the Russian armed forces don't have enough troops for continuous offensives along the entire front. This is not the Soviet army of World War II. Meanwhile, along the Attrition front, nothing major to be reported. I didn't hear or read any intel indicating that the Russians are preparing for an amphibious landing across the Dnieper. Supplying such an operation will also be extremely complicated, especially nowadays with all the drones buzzing in the air. There might also be something brewing in the northern part of Donetsk Oblast. Essentially, in January 2025, the Russians established a bridgehead over the Zherebyets River, and since then they broke through 15 kilometers westwards up to the village of Karpivka. If you're interested, I made an entire video about this operation. Link will be in the description below. Now, some Ukrainian reports indicate a concentration of forces in this bridgehead. This opens multiple possibilities for the Russian command. We can think the objective of this Russian army is to liquidate this salient up north, to flank this ridgeline going from Kopanki, Cherneshchina, all the way to Olhivka. Essentially, the goal would be to bring the front line to this position. There's also a political aspect to this battle plan, since it would bring to near completion the capture of Luhansk Oblast for Russia, one of the two separatist republics of the Donbass. Another course of action would be to focus southwards, order both the 20th and 25th Combined Arms armies to march in the direction of Liman. That way, they could benefit from a clear numerical advantage to crush enemy positions and take the Ukrainian defense into a pincer. Personally, if the Russians went for Liman, it would be the perfect diversion. Oh, I almost forgot. Russia is currently embarking in some sort of side quest in Kharkiv Oblast in order to snatch some more bottle caps. There's another hotspot along the Oskol River, but this time between Kupyansk and the Russian border. Since November 2024, the Russians have managed to establish multiple bridgeheads over the river. Surprisingly, no NGOs helped them cross over. They did so on their own with small boats and rafts. At first, the Ukrainians counterattacked and managed to regain some of the lost ground. But since then, Russian units of the 6th Command Arms Army captured the settlements of Dvorichna and Kamyanka. They also advanced 4 kilometers inland and secured the entire river banks of the Oskol. From these bridgeheads, the Russian 6th Army is now pivoting south, and they're now fighting on the northern outskirts of Kupyansk. As of July 1st, they're only 4.5 kilometers away from the city center. This means that this summer we could see the first Russian units enter the urban area of Kupyansk. If the Russians do make progress on the west bank of the river, the Ukrainians will have to abandon all their fortifications on the east bank. Imagine carrying out a withdrawal under enemy fire, FABs, artillery, drones, and across a river. What could possibly go wrong? According to the latest news, it's fresh out of the oven. Storm detachments of the Russian 6th Army and 44th Corps from Kursk crossed the Kharkiv border north of Veliki Borluk and captured the village of Milove. At the same time, Russian forces also expanded their area of control north of Topoli along the Russia-Ukraine border. My friends, keep an eye on this sector, but remember what I said in one of my previous videos. The Russian 6th Command Arms Army can launch a two-pronged attack towards Veliki Borluk. This means 3 Ukrainian cities are at risk of falling into enemy hands: Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, and Kupyansk. Oh yeah, we could also mention Sumy. If you're interested about what's going on there, I made an entire video. Link will also be in the description. But essentially, after Ukraine's Kursk operation, the Russians counterattacked and brought the battle right into Sumy Oblast. Currently, Ukraine's commander-in-chief Syrskyi said the Russian offensive towards Sumy has been pinned down. However, the Russians have 30 to 50,000 troops deployed there, including many of their elite airborne and marine brigades. I'm pretty sure the Ministry of Defense is not going to pay these guys to just sit around in some buffer zone and eat borscht. No. The final question. Is Ukraine going to launch a summer offensive of its own? Remember how in August 2024, the AFU launched a surprise attack against Kursk Oblast to divert as many Russian units away from the Donetsk direction. Let's be honest, we face a similar situation in 2025. Is Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi going to surprise us again this year? Is it why we've seen so many Ukrainian infiltrations in the Tyatkina sector, which lays in Kursk Oblast? Or is it just a diversion for a real offensive against Kharkiv to push back the Russians beyond the border? Perhaps even bring the battle to Belgorod Oblast? Or maybe an invasion of Transnistria? Who knows? That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new
intelligence officer, journalist, analyst, both Larry and Scott attest to this identity. Scott, good to see you.
Good to be here.
And then we have Garland Nixon. Good to see you, Garland. He is the host of his own show on YouTube, which you should all be watching. He's an independent analyst and geopolitical commentator. Garland, good to see you again.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Well, let's get started with the Ukraine situation, because the announcement is that certain weapons and munitions surrounding things like Patriot missile interceptors, Stinger, AIM air-to-air missiles, Hellfire, and GMLRS systems, things that I'll be asking you all about your expertise of. But first, I want to play what the State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce had to say in reaction to this Department of Defense announcement. So here we go.
I wanted to ask about, I understand the decision on which weapons to provide to Ukraine being one taken at the Pentagon, but from a diplomacy standpoint, does pausing the weapon deliveries for Ukraine make it more difficult to get Russia to come to the table in terms of a peace agreement or a ceasefire because it somehow relieves potential pressure on them?
It's a very good question, but it's good that it's not going to be a factor because we haven't paused sending weapons to Ukraine. This is one aspect, one situation, one event that has been changed. As you heard from the DoD, there are multiple robust other options and efforts regarding the Ukrainian situation with weapons. Again, I don't speak for the DoD. I can only refer to their statement. And
so, how about we start with you, Larry? What's happening here? What do you make of this situation regarding now this announcement that has stunned both Ukraine and its NATO backers?
Yeah, she's putting lipstick on a pig. Look, the reality is we have exposed the war in Ukraine and our attack on the Houthis and our support of Israel in its war with Iran and our role in that. It's exposed that the United States does not have fully stocked warehouses and unlimited supplies of Patriot missiles, THAAD missiles, Arrow 2, Arrow 3s, javelins, go down the list, 155 millimeter artillery shells. We do not have the industrial capability anymore to produce those in any kind of significant quantities, particularly at a replacement level when they're used in combat. I think that's one aspect of this, but the other aspect of it, we got a hint on, I guess it was Monday, Emmanuel Macron calls up Vladimir Putin, and they talk about Iran and Israel, and then they talk about hey, well, about ending this war, and Putin makes one very important point to him. He says, the West has got to realize that it's got to stop supplying Ukraine. Now, was it just a coincidence that within like 6 hours of that conversation between Macron and Putin that the DoD announces it's suspending these shipments of these weapons? Yeah, I'm not a big believer in coincidence. I think they were somehow connected, but the United States, we're still in a bit of denial. We don't recognize, despite Trump's claim that we're the biggest, best, strongest military in the world, we're not. We're
Oh, sorry. It looks like Larry must have frozen. Larry, please continue.
No, there's Larry again.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So you were just saying that the U.S. military is the biggest and best, and we're not. So continue.
No. So that was it. I'll stop there.
All right. How about you, Scott? What's your reaction to this? Your assessment? There's been very conflicting messages here. There's Tammy Bruce saying, well, there's other options, there's other things that can be done. But what actually happened here and what is going on?
I think what's happening here is that we have a defense procurement system that is optimized for peacetime operations and export operations, and not optimized for the reality of high intensity conflict. The Patriot is an expensive system, originally designed as to shoot down airplanes. Later on, it took on an anti-ballistic missile role, but a lot of our current production is predicated on the precedent of the Gulf War, where Iraq fired 49 Scud missiles into Israel and another 48 or so into the Gulf Arab states. And the expenditure rate of the Patriot was absorbable by on-hand stocks and replenishable by the money allocated for that purpose. Now we roll into the 20 years of the global war on terror. How many Patriots were fired in anger during this period of time? When the United States is talking about the prioritization of budgets, I don't think a high degree of priority was placed on fielding the Patriot system, et cetera. We were working on getting the SM-3 upgraded to the SM-6 so that we could have Aegis ships providing some sort of ballistic missile defense. But the Patriot, received some upgrades, but we weren't producing them and stockpiling them in preparation for what turned out to be a new reality. Take a look at the expenditure rate of the Ukrainian armed forces using Patriot to defend against Russian drone attacks and ballistic missile attacks. It was unsustainable. We literally we couldn't produce them quick enough. We had to borrow them from other nations, and we had to draw down our own stockpiles. And then you throw in, the Houthi throwing a curveball at us, and then the 12-day war with Iran. You have a commander in the Pacific right now who has been told that the United States is pivoting to the Pacific and that he needs to be prepared to deal with a Chinese threat. And I would imagine that if you receive that kind of instruction from the White House, one of the first things you do is you pull out the op plans and you do an op plan review to make sure that we have the forces allocated to accomplish the mission, but more importantly, logistical sustainability. And I'm fairly certain that J4 went up and raised his hand and said, "Hey, boss, we run out of ammo in, D+3 or D+7. But the bottom line is this isn't unsustainable of it. We can't let the National Command Authority believe that we can carry out these plans. We have to inform the National Command Authority that we are incapable of fulfilling the mission given to us because of logistical constraints, ammunition depletion. We've given everything away. Nobody's replacing it. We can't fight this war." That's what I think happened. I believe the Pacific Command put the Pentagon on notice that they're incapable of carrying out the mission that's being tasked to them. And unless things are reversed, and I think Central Command did the same thing. Said, if you want to continue with this high stakes poker game we have going with Iran, understand this, that our forces are literally, they can't be defended. We don't have the ability to defend them over a sustained period of time. This is grossly irresponsible. And so then we have to factor in the following. The reality is that Ukraine is not a high priority mission for the United States anymore. It's not just the political change that's taken place with Trump, but the reality that Ukraine can't win this war, and that there's nothing that Europe can do and the United States can do to reverse that trend. And therefore, you're literally throwing good money after bad by continuing to supply weapons to Ukraine, and in the process committing suicide. So I think this was a political decision that if you are Ukrainian or sympathetic to Ukrainian cause, you need to understand the reality that we have just dumped you. We aren't going to support you anymore. Yes, there might be some supply streams going forward. I mean, Tammy Bruce obviously isn't going to lie, so maybe she can point to, we're providing Xerox paper or something of that nature. But the high value ammunition, the Patriots, the Stingers, the things they need to fight on a daily basis, they're not there, and that means that Ukraine's stocks will reach zero, which means they can't be defended, which means the Russians will enjoy even greater success. That's the reality that exists because we don't have a defense procurement system capable of beefing up supplies to the Pacific and the Middle East while we continue to throw munitions away at Ukraine.
Yeah, it seems we might have lost Larry for a little bit, but Garland, your take on this, we've been hearing for so long under the Trump administration for these many months that this Ukraine conflict was going to draw down, that they were going to end it. We don't hear so much about that rhetorically anymore. It's going to end, but yet we see this move. What's your assessment?
I think there's two things that I could add, and that would be number one, of course, the obvious, and that is that the empire's overextended. I still recall it might have been 5 or 10 years ago, hearing Chris Hedges do this discussion where he talked about how empires end, and he talked about getting into all of these boneheaded military adventures, and that's how they fall apart. And now we're seeing that, and I think that is linked to what's going on here, in that the nature of warfare is changing. When you design an air defense system, maybe in the 80s or 70s or whatever, you're thinking of planes, right? Which means the number of planes that a country has is going to be fairly limited. You can probably count them. Okay, Russia has however many fighter planes, 1,500, 2,000 fighter planes, just as a number. And then you can say, well, we've got enough missiles to shoot down every one of their fighter planes times 5. And okay, you're fine. Now, what we have is where people are using drones and missiles. It's incompatible with air defense systems that were designed to shoot down planes. It is not compatible to have that air defense system and to face missiles, particularly when behind your air defense system is the industrial capability to produce the missiles. Not just to produce the numbers of missiles, but to produce them at a price that is affordable, that allows you to produce the number that you need, right? So what we have now is we have drones and missiles that may cost anywhere from, in some instances, $10,000 and less, and some up to maybe $1 million, some of the Iranian drones. But the missiles to take them down are from $2 to literally $18 million. So we're seeing now warfare has changed in a way that the United States is really generations behind when it comes to air defense. Their air defense is set up to shoot down fighter planes and planes. Some of these systems that we use, they don't really look much at the low. They're not really good at shooting the low flying things because these fighter planes and observation planes way up here, we can shoot them down with a missile. Great. But they can be flooded with drones. They can't produce the numbers. They can't produce them at a price. So not only is this an indicator of a current problem that we have in it supplying the missiles to Israel or whatever proxy, Ukraine around the world, and we have far too many, but that one is too many, but that even as the future goes, we're not going to be able to be the military power that we once will, because we can't produce the numbers at the prices that would allow us to even be, and I use this word, I don't really like using this word, but to be militarily competitive in the environment. You just can't do that with $18 million missiles. You're out of the game.
Yeah, and Larry, what do you think explains why, Russia is very clear. Vladimir Putin was in a call recently with Donald Trump, and he said very clearly that Russia is going to continue to address the root causes of this conflict, and we'll see those all the way through until they are fully addressed. But the Trump administration is unable to, despite these kind of moves, to vocalize and be very clear about ending this conflict. Even rumors that this ridiculous 500% tariffs, that they're flirting with this, punishing other countries for supporting Russia over Ukraine. What's your assessment of this? Why is it that this conflict seemingly continues even when steps like this occur, these drawbacks?
Power, but we're in denial of what we are. With the end of World War II, we found ourselves thrust into the role of being one of the world's leaders, and in fact, there was a competition at that point between the United States and the Soviet Union. But when we declared victory in 1991, we've been unwilling to relinquish that role. Our entire military is built up as an expeditionary force. It's not governed by any clear strategic doctrine of national defense, which goes to the point that Garland was making about the weapon systems that are designed, developed, produced are not connected to a national defense strategy, whereas Russia is. Russia is not an imperial military power. They're not going around the world trying to see where they can project force. They're not insisting on setting up, over 700 bases around the world. They do have interests close to home. They do pay attention to what's going on their borders. But their entire military has been structured specifically for defending the homeland, not for attacking the United States or conquering Europe. And we refuse to come to grips with that. And when Putin's talking root causes, what he's talking about is, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States, along with its NATO allies in Europe, have embarked on a campaign to destroy Russia. Ukraine has been a de facto member of NATO since 1995. The only thing they didn't have to kick in, 5% of their budget to NATO, and they didn't have Article 5 protection. But other than that, in terms of participation in NATO military exercises, hosting NATO military exercises, providing a base in Ukraine at Yavoriv for NATO, it's been a NATO entity in all regards. So from that standpoint, Ukraine was used as a proxy for attacking Russia, and that's one of the things Russia's going to put an end to. That's going to stop. That's not going to be allowed to continue, because if it was, Russia's very existence would be.
Looks like we're having a difficulty with Larry's audio. Maybe Scott, if you want to, Larry, do you want to continue? Sorry, I think you just got back.
Yeah, no, I don't know where this is happening. I've got a direct line into the internet. I mean, I'm hardwired, and I shut off, closed out every other application. Let me just say for the record, I hate StreamYard. StreamYard sucks. Sorry.
It does. Well, we can figure that out. Well, let's. How about Scott? Pick this up. The Bild, German media recently put out right after this announcement was made on the weapons drawdowns, the pause on weapon shipments to Ukraine, that Ukraine will only have a couple of months left to survive in this conflict. Give your, we've heard this before though, that different pauses and various problems. There's this panic ensuing. But what's your overall assessment on where the situation is now that these weapons have been paused?
Well, one thing I've learned in opining about predictions regarding Russia and Ukraine is that you can't use traditional norms and values and templates. I come from a Marine Corps background, very aggressive background. I just want to remind people that during the Gulf War, when the Marines briefed Schwarzkopf on the final ground campaign, we said, we'll be in Kuwait City in 3 days. And Schwarzkopf said, no, your job is to fix the Ukrainians in place. There's no way you're punching through the heaviest defenses there. So he gave it short shrift. Meanwhile, while 7th Corps was floundering in the desert and creating gaps between it and the Syrians and the Egyptians, causing an operational pause, we punched through the Iranian lines. We took Kuwait City in 3 days. Why? Because we're very aggressive. Because we don't know how to hit the pause button. And so my brain works that way as somebody who helped plan that attack. My brain is a very aggressive brain. So I have traditionally applied Marine Corps aggression to the Russian military situation. And the Russians just aren't playing my game, which is okay. It's their war. I think that the Russians are operating on a war of attrition schedule, which means that they don't give a damn about the calendar. They care about outcomes. One of their outcomes is the physical destruction of the Ukrainian military over time. When they speak of demilitarization, it can be done either through negotiations where the Ukrainians voluntarily demobilize down to 50,000 men, or it can be done on the battlefield where Russia will kill every Ukrainian until they get down to 50,000 men, and then they'll surrender, and that'll be it. But to put a timetable on this is impossible because, just again, to give you an example, and this is something that the American military reflect on. I think Larry will hopefully agree. The standard, when I went through the basic school back in 1984, 85, the finishing school for Marine lieutenants, we have a 3-day war at the end of it. And one of the missions that we have during the 3-day war is an assault against a fortified position. So you're going up against a series of bunkers that are have interlocking fields of fire, et cetera. So you have to plan how you're going to take out the bunkers one at a time while shielding yourself from the others, etc. If you screw it up, you die. I mean, it's training, so you just theoretical death. But it's one of the toughest missions that we were given, an assault against a fortified position. And we would go in with a Marine rifle company and carry out this attack. And that's my brain thinks in that way. It's rifle company, appropriate fire support, etc. The Russians don't do. I've had fascinating conversations with Russian generals, Abdialadonov and others. The Russians have rethought the whole approach. They do assaults now against a fortified position. Remember, we're bringing a Marine Corps company against a fortified position held by a platoon because you want 3-to-1 advantage. The Russians are assaulting because the Ukrainians now, they no longer have battalion-sized defensive positions or company-size or even platoon. You're basically talking about a reinforced squad. You're talking about 11 to 15 Ukrainian soldiers dug into a position. The Russians are assaulting this with 3 to 6 Russian soldiers. They call it 3s and 6s. That's their new term. The lead assault unit is 3 Russian soldiers who operate together, but they go in with fire support. They come in with drones, heavy drone support. And these 3 guys either die in the assault, which happens, or they succeed in the assault. Once they seize this fortified position and eliminate the Ukrainian squad, either killing them or capturing them, very rarely because of the drone supremacy does the Ukrainians escape. Once the Russians lock in on your position, either Ukrainians kill the Russian soldiers or they all die. But if Russia fails in the assault, they lost 3 guys, which isn't the end of the world. It's tragic for those 3. But the point is, this is a whole new way of thinking. It just boggles the mind that you would attack a fortified position occupied by 11 to 15 Ukrainian soldiers with 3 guys. But the Russians are doing this and they're winning over and over and over again. And once they occupy the position, they bring in the 6s who then secure the position, and then they prepare. Generally, they'll secure it for a couple of days. They'll do a rotation, and then they take the next tree line, the next fortified position, chunk after chunk after chunk after chunk after chunk. Very successful, and they're killing a lot of Ukrainians doing this and not losing a lot of Russians. Forget what you read in the media. The Russians are not, drowning in the blood of their own soldiers. It's a very deliberate process that they have in place here, which is resulting in the reduction of the Ukrainian army, but you're not getting the impressive gains, the big arrow gains. But the Russians are making significant gains. Just the other day, 10.5 square kilometers taken in chunks, because what will happen is you'll take a tree line, and if you didn't get the resistance, then they'll move on and take the next line, and and they'll go as long as they can sustain the 3s and 6s. When they get to a point where the resistance is too much, they don't sacrifice their soldiers in human wave assaults. They pull them back and they pound the crap out of that position. They bring up the drones, they suppress the Ukrainian drones, and they move in and they do it again. This is going to go on forever. As long as the Ukrainians are able to put a squad on the ground, the Russians will continue to do this for as long as it takes. We can't, I refuse anymore to fall into the trap of trying to put a timeline on this. The Russians are winning this war. There's no way they will stop winning this war. One of the major objectives is demilitarization, which requires the physical destruction of the Ukrainian military. There are between 700 and 900,000 Ukrainian soldiers mobilized to this day. The Ukrainians are able to generate, 14,000 more a month. Not the highest quality soldiers, but they're getting them by bumping them on the head. But they, it's not just that. That's sort of propaganda to focus on that. They are recruiting soldiers who go to training. Just like everybody else, they are conscripting people. It's not all about thumping on the head. People are volunteering. Some of these people are patriotic. The quality of the Ukrainian soldier is not uniformly poor. It's actually the opposite. Very, quality fighters, well equipped. Some of them are well trained. A lot of combat experience. They're tough. The Russians are beating them, but the Russians themselves have said, "We'll go on as long as it takes. We'll go on forever." 21 years. They bragged about the negotiator in Istanbul. 21 years it took to defeat the Swedes. You don't think we can do this for 21 years? We're ready to go 2, 3, 5, 7. We are going to do this as long as it takes. And that's the reality. This is inevitable. This becomes an inevitability. And, I think Ukraine's defeat will be hastened by the reduction of military support, but understand that Europe is continuing to pour in weaponry and supplies. And, every time they deliver it, that just extends the war longer. But the Russians are dominating every aspect of this conflict, and there's nothing that can be done to change that. So this war of attrition will continue for as long as it takes.
Well, in the interest of Larry's time, we're going to get back to maybe the specifics later in the show of this war of attrition. And maybe Garland, if you're okay with it, I want to begin with Larry on evaluating. We haven't had him on since, and also you too, Scott, live since the the U.S.-Israel war of aggression on Iran began. And so, Larry, I wanted your assessment of where the situation resides now. Iran has of course, cut off cooperation with the IAEA. It is warning that it hasn't really deployed even a significant fraction of its missile capabilities against Israel during those 12 days. But Israel and the United States, they are rearming. Even the United States is flirting with sending B-2 bombers to Israel in order to prepare it for the next phase of this conflict with Iran. So, Larry, your assessment of the situation, maybe your evaluation of the 12-day war and where things are now. Oh, sorry, you're muted. Hold on.
Okay. You got me unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. No, I viewed it as ultimately a victory for Iran because they survived the decapitation attempt. The whole uranium enrichment and Iran's supposed quest for a nuclear weapon, that's all just a distraction. That's a red herring. This has, I think, a lot more to do with eliminating the Islamic Republic and replacing it with a regime that's going to be pliant, obedient to the West. Particularly because Iran is in such a critical spot geographically and economically, now being part of BRICS, that candidly, it's a far more important member of BRICS than Brazil, South Africa, who were founding members of BRICS. And I think you could even make a case more important than India by virtue of Iran's natural gas, oil resources, and its location. But clearly, Israel took a beating with respect to the missiles. The fact that their censors clamped down so hard on the news reporting about what was actually hit. When you look at it, I always say compare what's happened between Russia and Ukraine over the last 3 years, 5 months. In that period, Russia's launched, a lot of ballistic missiles, a lot of cruise missiles. They've dropped bombs. They've hit them with tens of thousands of drones. Well, Iran is 3 times the size of Ukraine, both in terms of landmass and in terms of population.
That's great.
And so when it comes to exchanging missiles back and forth, Iran shut down Ben Gurion Airport. Israel only has 1 international airport. There was no other way for civilians to get out. Whereas Iran had 29 international airports. And so Israel shut down 2 of them. Well, they still had 27 more that they could operate in. Similarly with ports, Israel only had the 2 ports at Ashdod and Haifa. Those were damaged and stopped operating while the war was underway because the insurance companies weren't letting ships go in there. So all of a sudden, Israel now has cut off from air legs of supply and cut off from sea routes of supply. Then the 2 refineries damaged. They were both at Haifa and Ashdod. So just on an economic standpoint, Israel was taking a far worse beating than Iran. I'm not saying Iran didn't suffer any damage, but Iran could have definitely kept this going, and it was an arranged exit. The United States, I don't know the particulars of who approached who and what deals were made, but the United States got to launch its show an attack on the 3 nuclear processing facilities, and then Iran got to do its show at Al Udeid Air Force Base, but no mass deaths on either side. So I think Iran's now got to be prepared, though, that this isn't over. The West is coming back. Israel intends to, but Israel by itself does not have the capability. It needs the United States. And so from that standpoint, I can't rule out the possibility of a false flag.
Yeah, Garland, your take, there were some, especially viewers of this channel, who were disappointed that Iran decided to take a ceasefire. But your assessment of the situation as you were evaluating it, what's your take?
Well, I think Iran is in a difficult position, and I think the leader of any country is responsible for the people of his country. And you never know the direction a war can take. Iran was facing up against 2 nuclear powers, and so I think that when the opportunity came for Iran to stop hostilities, it took the opportunity, and I think that was wise. It's easier. It's easy when you're sitting over here on the sidelines to say that somebody else who's faced off against potential nuclear attack should keep going. But I think they did the wise thing. I think they did. And here's the other important thing. They demonstrated a level of morality and a level of responsibility in this conflict so that people around the world look at them and will say, well, you said from the beginning, if you stop shooting at me, I'll stop shooting at you. And you continue to keep your word. So I think that they looked like Iran came out of it looking, number one, like they were quite able to defend themselves. And I think they came out looking like the adult in the room. And I think that was critical for Iran as far as how they deal with their allies and how the rest of the people perceive Iran. And internally, they want to, I'll put it like this, because something my dad used to always say, know how to take a win. When they stopped, they had inflicted significant pain upon the very foundational parts of Israel, their research and development, their military industrial, their military capabilities, their bases, their economic and technology. So they inflicted pain upon their enemies. The U.S. had to kind of go in there and do a fake bombing to get out. All over the world, people were saying, wow, you guys really were able to, put a licking on Israel pretty good. The people in their country were kind of starting to circle the wagon, say, some of us may have been a little pissed off with the government. But you know what? I just saw a poll where now 77% of Iranians say they're proud of Iranians' missile and drone capabilities. So at that point, they had a win. It was smart. They took a win. Add to this. They knew at that point that they could, as the Chinese say, they have a really, a long spear, but a short shield, right? They knew that they could inflict pain, but they had some holes in their air defense system. So it gave them an opportunity to take a win at home, take a win abroad, inflict pain on their enemies, and to now have time to regroup, because they knew it isn't just over, but they had an opportunity to regroup, to meet with some of their allies, to strengthen their air defense system, and maybe some other things that they need to even build more missiles to be able to defend themselves. So I think for numerous reasons, it was a very wise move by the Iranians. And I'll say this too, to go back after the Iranians, I think the U.S. has to do it, because Israel now is really a paper tiger. Their bases have been splatted. Their ability to refine fuel and the jet fuel and all the things they need is extremely hampered. They've got just so much damage right now. Their ability to even make some of the missiles and things that they need for some of their systems, the Rafale, their big, and the Elbit systems, both of them were hit. So I think they were able to cripple Israel to a point where it will almost have to be the United States to come in and attack them, because Israel couldn't. I mean, if Israel started 10 more days, they took 12 days and they were flattened. 12 more days, and it's curtains for Israel, if it didn't already curtains for Israel. I think they were wise, and I think they really were very ably stood for themselves in this conflict.
Yeah, Scott, given what Garland said and what Larry's been saying, maybe you could evaluate the military side of all of this. what transpired and how it ended up shaping up the way it did, because even just very early on in the back and forth, Operation True Promise 3, and of course Israel strikes, there were reports that Israel was running out of air defenses, and then we had the ceasefire after the 12th day. So your assessment of what happened there?
Well, when you're speaking about war, there's two things. One, go back to old Karl von Clausewitz, war is an extension of politics by other means. So, you got to look at what the political objective was, not just what the military action was. And then another one, just an old truism, no plan survives initial contact with the enemy. So no matter what both Israel, United States, and Iran were thinking a conflict would look like, it ended up looking like something totally different. When we go to war as an extension of politics by other means, the stated objective of Israel in attacking Iran, at least initially, was to destroy its capability to produce nuclear weapons. And that, of course, was the United States' stated objective. But Israel has since then acknowledged that this had a regime change component. Indeed, their surprise attack that they initiated on July 12th, the night of July 12th, targeted the senior leadership, especially the senior conservative leadership of Iran, to include Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. The Israelis acknowledged they were trying to kill him. They struck some places they thought he wasn't there. And they continued to hunt him down and wasn't able to find them. Trump has bragged that, he knows where Khamenei is and we could kill him at any time, he bragged. Why? Unless you had regime change as the goal and objective. And they failed. So that objective failed. So from a military standpoint, if the true objective of the Israelis was to collapse the regime, which it appears to be, look at their decapitation strikes. And I just want to remind people that that's a copacetic way of saying murder, because this was a cowardly surprise attack. And I emphasize the term cowardly. That's perfidy, the very definition of perfidy. The United States was engaged in negotiations with Iran, good faith negotiations on the part of Iran, which would address the totality of Israel and America's, nuclear weapons related concerns. A treaty, not a fatwa anymore, but a treaty. And treaties, people understand, have verification mechanisms built into it. So this wasn't just we'll sign a treaty, trust us. This was, we'll sign a treaty and you have verification mechanisms in place to ensure that this treaty is accurate and complied with. Iran was ready to do this, to include, apparently, to allow U.S. inspectors on the ground in Iran. Very big deal. Very big deal. They'd been banned. U.S. inspectors weren't allowed to be part of the IAEA. And now Iran's saying, we understand there's a necessity to do this. Elimination of 60% enriched uranium, reduction of excess cascade enrichment capabilities. We could go on and on and on. Iran was doing this in good faith and preparing for a sixth and decisive round. And Israel said, yeah, we're on board with this. And then they launched their attack. This was an attack against men who were sleeping at home with their families. All right. This isn't hunting down the evil Iranian general who's out working, plotting to destroy the world. This is a man at home with his family sleeping when the Israelis struck, killing not just a number of these officers, but their families. Sometimes if they didn't have the specificity of the intelligence about which apartment building they lived in, they just dropped the building, dropped the entire building, killing everybody in it, including all the other innocent women and children that lived in that facility. So it was a cowardly act carried out by the Israelis. And it didn't work. So war is an extension of politics by other means. The political objective was regime change, and it didn't work. You saw the Israelis, after their attempt at regime change, try to put pressure on the Iranians, saying to the surviving moderate president, just let us finish the job of destroying your nuclear facilities, and then it will all be over. And Iran was like, no, that ain't going to happen. And they retaliated. Now, for the Iranians, they had a plan in place. It's been in place since 2005, 2006. At least that's when it began, back when they were afraid that the United States was going to implement Wesley Clark's, statement that seven nations in 7 years. And Iran was the seventh nation on that, and it looked like from the Iranian perspective, the United States was going to act. If people recall, in the month of March 2006, during the celebration of I think it's Nowruz is the holiday. Iran shut the nation down, went into a war footing. Now the attack didn't come, but as part of their preparations, Iran divided their nation into 57 different military districts, each of which was prepared to carry out independent resistance for up to 2 years. That means that if decapitation took place, Iran doesn't collapse. The nation is designed to continue even if they don't have, instructions from Tehran. And Iran continued to dig in, reinforce a lot of these underground cities you see, the missile cities, etc., are put into a military district so that district can continue offensive operations against Israel or Western targets on its own volition. It doesn't need Tehran. So this system was in place, and then Israel hit, and that plan went out the window. The Israeli regime plan went out the window. That didn't survive. The Iranian resistance with massive missile strikes, taking out the totality of Israel, that didn't happen. Iran was hit hard. They lost air defense. We don't know how many of their missiles were hit, but we know that the Israelis were targeting missile storage facilities. Some of those things were burning pretty bright with variations in flame intensity, implying that things were burning there like rocket fuel motors. So Iran had to adjust, and they made the adjustment. Israel did something that nobody had predicted. Well, nobody, but I'm not going to take total credit. But if I remember, I was talking with Professor Mirande right after the assassination of Haniyeh. Maybe it was on your show, Danny. And I said, they just used a drone to assassinate a senior Hamas official in Tehran on Inauguration Day. That means they can kill anybody they want to at any time. Do you understand? And I told them straight up that the attack that will take place against Iran will be a decapitation strike. It will begin with a decapitation strike. And Israel just told you how they're going to do it with these drones. And he's like, don't worry about it. We got that all under control. Well, you didn't have it under control. The Israelis used drones to carry out a decapitation strike, and you weren't ready for it. And when you uncovered it, you realized the Israelis, this isn't just one or two drones. They had entire drone factories. They had warehouses full of tens of thousands of drones all over the country, and they used them very effectively to take apart the Iranian air defense system. And so Iran now is dealing with a situation where they're trying to carry out a ballistic missile-based campaign against Israel, but they have to deal with the fact that Israeli aircraft and drones are able to penetrate Iran and start hunting these missiles down. That changes your strategy and your tactics as well. And then the final thing the Israelis were able to pull off was being able to fly from Syria into northern Iraq, dogleg up into Azerbaijan, come in and attack Tehran from the Caspian Sea. Iranian air defense wasn't ready for that. And the Israelis were able to do extreme harm to Iran, hitting them really hard. And so from the Iranian perspective, yes, they're pounding the Israelis. They got their act together. They were able to get the campaign up. They're gathering intelligence. They're hitting the targets that need to hurt. And Israel's getting hurt, but Iran's getting hurt too. And the Israelis had some tricks. They penetrated the Iranian secure communications facility. Were able to lure Iranian officials into known locations before hitting them with a bomb and killing or wounding a number of officers that way. So from the Iranian perspective, this is a war that's rapidly spinning out of control. Iran was not in control of this conflict. They were in control of the strikes against Israel, but they definitely weren't in control of what was going on inside Iran. And that's a dangerous situation. The Israelis, likewise, weren't in control. They could bomb Iran, but they were getting pounded. They weren't in control. Both sides were punch-drunk fighters, desperate for the fight to be called. And the fight has been called. So where are we now? I think Iran has the upper hand. One, because they retain the ability to strike Israel, and there's nothing the Israelis can do to prevent that. No amount of flying in ballistic missile defense systems is going to change the fact that Israel had all the ballistic missile defense systems it needed for those 12 days, and they couldn't stop the Iranians. But now, the Mossad's drone capabilities have been eviscerated. So they won't have that. Are they going to pull something else out of the bag? I don't know. It took them 10 years to put that one in there. That they lost a tremendous capability. That was supposed to be the Sunday punch, and it failed. The dog leg out of Azerbaijan, that's not going to work again. Iran has gone to China, and if the reports are right, they got 40 JS-10 fighters coming in. These are advanced fighters with advanced systems, with advanced radars, and you run a combat air patrol over the Caspian Sea, and anything comes in the Caspian Sea will be shot down. So the Israelis lose that. I imagine the Iranians will get their air defense system back up. If the Iranians are smart, and I believe they're some of the smartest people in the world, on day one, when they wake up and go, damn, the Israelis are taking out all of our radars, rather than doubling down and going, deploy everything, I think they went, withdraw everything. Preserve as much as we can until we figure out what the hell is going on here, because things are just blowing up. And so I think Iran will re-examine what needs to be done. You're not going to get that knockout punch again. And I think if there's a future conflict, Israel's going to get pounded into the dirt again. There's nothing they can do to stop that. And Israel's ability to hurt Iran will be severely curtailed. So I think this is advantage Iran altogether, with one thing, and I'll just leave it at this. I think Iran is foolish, fatally so, to even suggest that they could produce a nuclear weapon. I told, again, I think I was on your show and others back in the fall, and I said, you are inviting an attack from Israel and the United States, that you will never be allowed to have nuclear weapons, ever, never. Don't even think about it. And the fact that they went up the threshold capability, I told Morandi on this show, I think I did him on Nima's show too, you're going to get attacked because of this. And they did. And I will state as simply as I can, if Iran produces a nuclear weapon, Iran will be physically destroyed by the United States of America. And we will use whatever means necessary to achieve that. I don't care what anybody thinks. Iran should have a weapon. They should be allowed to. I don't care what you think. There's only one vote that matters here, and that's the United States, that it says you will never have a nuclear weapon, ever. Iran is in a strong position right now. I believe that they have a lot of leverage against the IAEA in order to get a reform of that inspection process. I think Iran has enough leverage to retain an enrichment capability through negotiations. But if Iran thinks, as even Morandi suggested, that they could build something in secret, how do you think the Israelis penetrated Iran? Why do you think they got into the secure communications? You really think that Iran can hide this from Israel and the United States? I can guarantee you we will know when the decision is made to produce a nuclear weapon. We will know it, and then we will act. And this is where everybody has to stop the nonsense about saying it's time for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. It's okay for Iran. They're just fine. It's an act of suicide. And that's a guaranteed outcome. Guaranteed.
Larry, I know that you're short on time, so I definitely want your final comment. Sorry, you're muted. Hold on. Okay.
Yeah, I've got to go here in a couple of minutes. I would just say this, that what was proven out of all of this is that the myth of Israeli invincibility was destroyed. And the myth of U.S. military power was also damaged. We couldn't stop the Houthis. We launched this one raid on Iran, and then, called it a day and took credit. Again, just as Trump said, hey, those Houthis capitulated. Man, those Iranians capitulated. But the fact is, Iran was not asking for the ceasefire. It was Israel. And, so I agree with Scott that, Iran did suffer some major damage. But it's a much bigger country, can absorb, just like a big guy can absorb more blows from a child than a child can from a big guy. And it's sort of the same principle. I apologize for bailing out. I'll see you, Garland, in about an hour. Scott, always a pleasure, brother.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
All right, Garland, your assessment then, given all that we've talked about with regard to Israel, Iran, of course, U.S. Israel's war of aggression on Iran, and the possibility, of course, of another phase, another round coming our way.
Well, a couple of things. I'll say this. We know that a lot of countries, Russia does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And with a lot of, particularly with Russia, who I think is, they're an ally with Iran. It's not about whether Iran has a right to, which under, okay, sure, and whether they've been attacked and whether, okay, fair enough, right? You can make that argument. The issue that Russia has and that a lot of people have is this, and that's for the overall safety of the world in that, if they get one, that Saudi Arabia has the money and they're going to say, we got to have one. Of course, Turkey's got to have one. UAE is going to, and what you're going to have is a really, really heavily nuclear armed Middle East, which is a problem. I know, yes, Israel has one. Well, we should be trying to go in the other direction, not forward. So I think a lot of countries are not just looking at whether Iran has the opportunity, should have the opportunity to defend themselves with a nuclear weapon. It's, man, if that happens, then, and you've got countries such as, here's one of the discussions, if there was a major war, some of these countries like UAE or Saudi Arabia potentially could fall because you've got countries where 98% of the people on the streets are, agree with the Palestinians, but where the government kind of goes along with the West and helps defend missiles coming into Israel, et cetera, which means in a major war, some of these countries could fall. There are a lot of people who have said, look, who knows if these countries are even going to stand with what's going on in the Middle East. So what you could eventually have is countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, with missiles and completely unstable governments, maybe, ISIS type, who knows what. And now they get missiles. You just don't want these things to happen. So notwithstanding Iran's right to defend themselves, there are a lot of other factors that countries like Russia and major other countries are taking into account here, saying, how can we do this in a way that this nuclear proliferation thing doesn't, get out of control? And I think that's a responsible way to look at it. But when I look at the attacks on, one of the discussions when you talk about the Samson option, the U.S. doing something like using a nuke, the Straits of Hormuz closing down, right? And that is the U.S. empire. The question becomes, would the U.S. empire swallow a poison, swallow a suicide pill, right? In a lot of these instances, there are things that can happen that would obliterate, to use one of Trump's favorite words, the entire Western economy. And at that point, you ain't really an empire anymore. I don't know what you are, but I always say this, the ruling elite's biggest fear is always internal uprising, a revolution, that the people will go so nuts that they'll go crazy and just start, tearing the place apart, burning things down. In any event, that the United States, as pampered as U.S. people are, and they're angry right now that things aren't going so well economically. And if they wake up tomorrow and it's $13 a gallon for gas and hyperinflation, and you need a wheelbarrow full of dollars to buy a wheelbarrow just to carry your dollars, then this place is going to fall apart. So I think that there is certainly a concern amongst the people who run this country that we got to kind of step lightly, because do we really want to say we believe in this so much that we're willing to wipe out the entire Western economy? We'll lose power. We could be killed. Everything that this empire, all of this stuff that we are like, oh, this is great, could disappear. So I have a great question as to whether the U.S. will do something to swallow the suicide pill. Some people, oh, we'll nuke so-and-so, or we will, attack Russia or whatever. I think the last thing they want to do is swallow a suicide pill. But then again, you never know. I'll put it like this. If you're on the other end of that suicide pill, you can't really say for sure whether they will or not. The thing I think is this, and this is what keeps coming back to me when people say Israel is gearing up to attack Iran again. Israel really took some hard hits. And Israel, as we knew it, it's not the same Israel. Or if all of your bases have been hit really hard, if your refineries have been hit really hard, if the things that produces your missiles and tanks and all of that are splattered and you're trying to rebuild them in 12 days. So you're going to go back and you're going to say, well, this time we ain't going to have the jump on them. This time we ain't going to have 12 hours with no air defense system so we can smack them all of them. And this time they've had time to prepare for some of our tactics and some of the things we're doing. So we're going to go now and we're going to fight them toe to toe. So we're not going to have the same success. And we know they're going to open up on us from day one, maybe harder. So if we're kind of after 12 days saying a little bit of uncle, there's literally, Iran is 78 times bigger than Israel. So Israel can't go into an attrition war with somebody 78 times bigger than them. So what are they going to do? Another 12 days? They were almost destroyed in 12 days. So, okay, they're going to attack again. And in 12 days, 14 days, and not to mention that the damage done in 12 days would be exponential over the next. It wouldn't just be the same amount of damage 12 days. It would be like somebody like a boxer gets a cut. Somebody keeps hitting that cut. Why? Because they know it's going to get worse and worse and bleed so bad the person will have to go out, right? 12 more days will be 10 times more than the first 12 days. I'm not going to say they won't. They may. I don't know. I don't see how the hell Israel can do it. I think the U.S. would have to do it. And I don't know. I think Trump really got scared by some of the MAGA people freaking out. I think he really got scared by, I think he really got scared by the potential for closing the Straits of Hormuz. There's a lot of people that want to. Will Trump make the decision to get another slice of that pie? I'm not sure he will. Or whoever's making the decision. I'm not sure they will go back down that road. Maybe they will. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure they will.
Scott, final question before we pivot back. Would B-2 bombers to Israel make a difference?
B-2 bombers to Israel is an act of treason. It's insane. You have two insane U.S. congressmen talking about this. The B-2 bomber is a strategic weapon system, highly classified. The idea that we would give it to Israel is just ludicrous. I just want to remind people that, let's not forget about the USS Liberty, but that's not the worst of what Israel has done. Israel spies against us all the time, betrays us. People go ahead and look up the Lavi fighter, Lavi. That was Israel's answer to the F-16. That they were going to produce their own fighter, but they borrowed extensively from the F-16 project. We provided this technology to them under the conditions that it stays in Israel. Lo and behold, a Lavi fighter ends up in China at a research and development facility being reverse engineered by the Chinese because Israel cut a secret deal with China. Israel sells us out all the time. Jonathan Pollard was a spy who was arrested in the 1980s. He gave to Israel the crown jewels of the American intelligence community. That is a book that contained all of the frequencies that we were intercepting, the codes that we had broken, the codes that we couldn't break, how long it took to break the codes, etc. Everything an enemy would need to know to make themselves secure from our signals intelligence. He gave that book to the Israelis. And then the Israelis sold it to the Russians in exchange for favorable immigration. The Israelis betray America 24/7. The CIA and the FBI have long said, and these are reports that are suppressed, that the number one espionage threat faced by the United States today is the Israeli government. They spy on us all the time. If you remember, there was a AIPAC, had the controversy back when I think Rubin and Franklin, two of the AIPAC people, were arrested and investigated for spying. They were passing classified information from the Pentagon through AIPAC to an Israeli consular official. They just spy. That's what they do. Barack Obama's White House was thoroughly penetrated by technical listening devices. Surrounding the White House, there are technical listening devices all over the place installed by Israel, focusing on collecting information about the President of the United States, about National Command decision-making authority. Israel's our enemy. They're not our friends. And you want to give them B-2 bombers. Are you high? That B-2 bomber, that classified information pertaining to the B-2 bomber will be sold to our enemies before you know it, or our potential enemies, our potential adversaries, the people that we were building this bomber to respond to. So I just think this is an act of absurd propaganda, but it is also an act of treason, and it should be treated as such. These people should be investigated. Why are you trying to give away some of the most highly classified technology in the United States arsenal to Israel, knowing that Israel has a history of selling this information for its own good? Israel doesn't work for the benefit of the United States. Israel only works for the benefit of Israel.
Yeah. And Well, Scott, in the last final segment of the show, how about we begin with you again? Just talking about the battlefield situation in Ukraine. The Western mainstream media has been very much up in arms about these massive attacks that the Russian military has been undertaking on Ukraine, and they've also been panicking about the Sumy and the Dnepropetrovsk. I can never pronounce it correctly. Front. So if you could talk about what exactly is happening on the battlefield now, and what can we expect for the rest of this long, hot summer?
Well, I mean, Russia has said that Vladimir Putin apparently had a conversation with Emmanuel Macron, and he said that, while Russia's not opposed to a negotiated outcome, it will have to deal with realities, including territorial reality. And the territorial reality is as such. As things stand, Russia's requirements are that all 4 of the Novorossiya territories, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Lugansk, in their totality belong to Russia. And Russia will occupy all of them, including the right bank of Kherson. And because of the nefarious actions of the Ukrainians, Russia will create an appropriately sized buffer zone. And what we see happening in Sumy and in Dnepropetrovsk is Russia acting on that, meaning that they will advance until which time they have created a buffer between what will be left of sovereign Ukraine and Mother Russia, that Ukraine will not be allowed to have a common border with Russia because Ukraine has attacked Russia, and Russia is not going to allow that to happen again. This is the reality. And this is what Russia is moving for. In his conversation with President Trump today, Putin said the same thing. We will address the root causes of this conflict. And one of the root causes is, of course, Ukraine's behavior, their de facto status as a NATO member. And that will be reversed. And so I think what we're going to see this summer is progress along those lines. But Russia is not going to throw away human life needlessly. They don't need to. This is a war of attrition. Garland and I have had this conversation repeatedly, and I'll just say it again. At some point in time, there will be a culminating moment where Ukraine's ability to maintain cohesive defense along the totality of the front will diminish to the point of zero, and you will see collapse. And that collapse will be dramatic. I continue to believe that Russia has the potential of achieving that collapse this summer. Ukraine has shown a tremendous amount of resilience over the years, and if Russia isn't willing to put remember, the more aggressive you are, the more casualties you take. Right now, Russia has a winning formula that minimizes Russian losses, maximizes Ukrainian losses, and hasn't shown a proclivity to change that. But if Russia decides to put their pedal to the metal, they can accelerate the collapse because you will, create a mathematical equation which has the Ukrainians losing resources at a far greater rate than they can be replenished. And at some point in time, you achieve collapse. But that's a political decision that has to be made, because to do that, to put the pedal to the metal, you're going to increase Russian casualties at a time when I think the Russian government doesn't want to alter the support of the Russian people. Right now, the Russian people have steeled themselves to the reality of this conflict, to include Ukrainian drones striking deep inside Russia. But they've also, they've reached an equilibrium of what kind of battlefield losses can be accepted. Understand that the Russian losses are greater than the losses we suffered in Vietnam. Vietnam broke the back of America. The Russian losses are greater than that. They are occurring at a larger frequency than Vietnam. So the Russian people have to absorb real losses, real battlefield losses. And I don't think that Vladimir Putin wants to change that this equilibrium by making the Russian people absorb even more losses. Especially when you have a winning strategy, you have a constituency that's supporting you on this war. I think the Russians will just continue as business as usual, 3s and 6s, until the Ukrainians collapse. And that could happen this year, that could happen next year, it could happen whenever it happens, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, and Garland, what do you say? You know, we just had an audience member, and I'll acknowledge the super chats later in the show. Say that that we've been wrong about Ukraine, that they've been far harder to defeat than we've been saying they are, and that Russia is taking massive hits. What is your answer to this in relation to what Scott is saying? And Scott, you'll also get to answer this too.
Well, I think here's the thing. I mean, this is not, again, this is not Yemen. This is the most powerful NATO army, a proxy that's ever been created. And in my opinion, Russia has destroyed it 2 to 3 times over. At the same time, Russia has demilitarized NATO in that Russia I don't know if it's intentionally, but in the method that they fight, which is a very slow method of fighting. It's a very cautious and continuous way of fighting. I think that they have demilitarized NATO. They have been very effective. I mean, it was a 1 million man army, and they've been adding people the whole time. So let's not pretend that this was ever going to be a cakewalk for anyone, for Russia, et cetera. It was the combined might of all of NATO focused and concentrated on Russia. At the same time, there was a full spectrum attack. Add terrorist attacks. You have to add economic attacks, diplomatic, trying to make people stop buying things from Russia. So this was a full spectrum war on Russia. And I would argue that given the size of this attack on Russia, that they have, done quite well. And the way Russia fights means that sooner or later, the eventuality was that they were always going to win. I don't think Russia was ever had a calendar here saying we have to win by this day or that way. It was, we're going to do things the way we do them. And in the end, this is existential and we will win. I also think that, as an example, supposedly Presidents Putin and Trump talked today, and Trump did the old, hey, like Macron, when can we get some kind of a ceasefire? And apparently President Putin just reiterated what he's always reiterated. Look, we got to address the underlying issues, because the underlying issues are what make it existential to Russia. And the true underlying issue is that NATO was always a mechanism to destroy Russia so that the NATO countries could go in, take Russia, break it into pieces, and split it amongst each other and take all of its natural resources. Russia knows that. I know that. You guys know that. And Russia knows that just ain't going to happen. So I think that ultimately what we're looking at here is, I got to add this. I also think that if Russia didn't already know what they were up against, watching what happened in Iran, seeing the complicity, seeing the things that was done, utilizing various, like the IAEA, utilizing international organizations as tools of imperialism by the U.S., sneaking attacks from other countries inside the countries, lying and saying that we were negotiating a deal at the same time we're hiding a knife behind our back so we could get you to look the other way during negotiations and attack you. All of these things, I think, have even more convinced Russia we have to hold firm. We've got to do what we know we need to do. And I think the fact is, keep an eye on Russia constantly saying we must address the underlying issues, because the underlying issues are not just Ukraine. The underlying issue is a comprehensive security agreement with Europe that includes getting, as they said at the very beginning, getting NATO's military infrastructure off of their border. And I think as this continues, they're going to at some time bring up the things that they said back in December of 2022, which was we have to address NATO on our border and NATO expansion. And they're going to want to talk about that. And Ukraine is not the only thing that's existential to Russia, and the discussion will come up. I also think this. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we don't see a Russia, China, Iran, some kind of a military alliance come up. And now I thought a while back, probably no, but some things that I'm hearing leads me to believe that I think not only will we, I think in order to shut down the crazies, the hotheads, as they refer to them in Washington, they're going to have to do that. So my guess, could be wrong, is that may come at some point also.
Yeah, well, sometimes even if you don't want an alliance, sometimes an alliance comes seeking you. Scott, as we begin to close out here, your final analysis on this, the significance of Lugansk. We haven't talked about this yet on the program, but given that Putin talks a lot about root causes, Lugansk, Donetsk. I mean, these were huge in the proliferation and the sparking of this conflict to begin with. So what's the significance of Russia?
Danny, I got to run. It's almost 2:30. I got to get ready to run myself. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
After announcing earlier this week that the United States was no longer going to be sending 155mm artillery shells and air defense interceptor missiles to Ukraine, now all of a sudden it's appearing that that might be reversed, that President Trump may be going back on some of the comments made by some of the senior administration officials and spokespeople, and is going to be sending some air defense interceptors to Ukraine after all, or at least he's going to be discussing it. And man, is that something that is certainly needed on the Ukraine side, is these incredible images you're seeing here, extraordinary, are from Kyiv, Ukraine, because overnight there was yet another Russian aerial attack into Ukraine. This time it is in a very important operational area not far from Kharkiv. I'll be showing that to you on the map here shortly. But this just shows that there is virtually nothing that is stopping the Russian onslaught. Even in areas where Ukraine has air defense, they just don't have enough. And so even Russian drones, which is a category that the Patriot system is designed to hit and can pretty much hit a very sizable portion of it, but Russia keeps having more than the Ukraine side has in air defense missiles. And as long as that's the case, not just the Kinzhal missiles or the KH-101s, but even just some of those regular drones, the improved drones that the Russians have that they built up from what they got from Iran a couple of years ago. Now then, these missiles are sending. You're seeing this is a major fire here that's going on, and that's just one of many. That's not at all unlike the one we showed you yesterday from the previous night in Kiev, where there was all kinds of destruction that was going on in that war. Yeah, that's the ones right here. So you see, this is in back-to-back nights. And listen, I mean, let's just be frank here. A few more air defense missiles are not going to stop any of this stuff. It's not going to change the course of the war. It's not going to prevent Russia from doing this because they just have too many aerial objects, whether drones or missiles, to be able to saturate anything the Ukraine can decide to do. And the fact is, we just don't have them. We don't have enough at scale that what would be necessary to actually have a huge impact on this war. I mean, you'd have to literally saturate Ukraine with these to have a meaningful reduction. And that's still all you're going to get is a reduction. So if anybody thinks this is going to have any kind of possibility to change the course of the war, I'm afraid they're going to be sadly mistaken. And in terms of ending the war, there's been some developments and some more information regarding the twin phone calls Trump had, first of all, with Vladimir Putin on, I believe it was the 3rd of July, and then with Zelensky on the 4th of July. We talked a little bit about both of those yesterday. There's been additional information, some of which from Trump himself on Air Force One yesterday after a day of celebrating July 4th activities in the United States. He was asked a number of questions about the Ukraine-Russia war.
Mr. President, Putin has not agreed to a ceasefire. Do you think he's mocking you?
No, I don't think he is. I think he's worried about sanctions. I do think he's very worried about sanctions. And, we're determining that the Senate, as you know, has put in big sanctions, very big sanctions.
You want to see Patriot missiles go into Ukraine?
Well, they need them for defense. I mean, I don't want to see people killed. And they're going to need them for defense. They're amazingly effective. We knocked out 14 out of 14. That's pretty amazing. If you think of it, it's almost incredible. But we knocked out 14 out of 14. So they're going to need something because they're being hit pretty hard.
Are you going to send them, though? Are you going to send more?
Yeah, we might. We're looking at it.
So a couple of things that he mentioned there. We'll start off with this issue of the sanctions that he mentioned there. He said the U.S. Senate, that's the one that's being pushed by Lindsey Graham, who's promising to have this huge sanction package along a bipartisan issue that's going to cripple the Russian economy, et cetera. And I mean, we have to keep talking about it because they keep bringing it up, but Russia has made itself sanctions proof. You can still cause some discomfort and some pain, but it's annoyance at most. That's the best that we can get done right now, because Russia, because of these years of sanctions, and I think it's literally in the thousands of different sanctions we have on Russia, they have learned how to live without it. And Russia has these big, its own natural resources. It's got all of the things it needs to be able to self-contain, even if it had nothing else. But as we showed you with Patrick Bob, the German reporter that was on just a couple of days ago, who attended an economic forum in St. Petersburg recently, he said they're not isolated. There was 20,000 participants in this thing from all over the world. And he said, if anybody thinks that a sanction from the West is going to cripple Russia, he said they're not paying attention. So when you still have the president of the United States, when you still have U.S. senators talking a lot of smack, like they think that this is a scary tool that they can wield and it's going to cause the Russian president to pause or to redirect or change his mind about something, again, you're just deluding yourself. That's not going to have any effect any more than sending a handful of more interceptor missiles. We're going to have to start dealing with the core crux issues of this war and peace issue. And this is ultimately an attritional warfare that's being waged by the Russian Federation against everybody that's supporting the Ukraine side. Certainly not just against those two. Russia gets help from Iran and from North Korea, and Ukraine from the entirety of the Western world, and even some beyond that too. And it's an attritional war. And of course, Ukraine is one that's paying the attritional cost in blood, in treasure, and in territory. And that's going to continue on. And as long as we won't deal with those fundamental truths, then the war is going to continue being attrition, and the Ukraine side is going to continue to be ground down in every single category. One of the other things that President Trump talked about there was that he said, yeah, there's more Patriots that are needed for defense. Now, of course, we just mentioned that earlier in the week, we said that's it. We're not going to be sending anymore. And then comes this phone call. And Trump talks about how good they are. And I'm not sure what he meant about that whole 14 out of 14 thing. He didn't put it in any context. I don't know if he was talking somewhere that the Patriot systems in Ukraine shot down 14 out of 14 targets. If he was talking something in Israel, I don't know. He didn't say. Not sure how relevant that is, because you can shoot down some of the slower drones. That's a fact. There's no question about that. But you better have thousands of Patriots per day. I mean, just consider in 2 days and a 3-day span, Russia fired over 1,000 drones and missiles into Ukraine in 2 days over a 3-day time period, just this past week. So as you may know from many of the guests we've had on here, you have to very often shoot 1 or 2 Patriot missiles per target that's coming in. So you're going to have 1,000, probably closer to 1,500, just to be able to have a shot at intercepting all of those targets over 2 days. No one's even talking about that kind of process. And I think that the production capacity in the United States on interceptor missiles is currently up now about 100 higher than it was when the war started in 2022. Now it's around 600 per month. So you can see that would have lasted a day and a half. If 100% of everything that we produced in that particular month was going on there, and you're talking 2 days, and that still wouldn't have been enough. That gives you a scale of the problem. And of course, these things are also going on all throughout the country. The previous one was in the city of Kiev, and the one yesterday was in the city just outside of Kharkiv, which plays an important role elsewhere too. And so now then we have Trump saying, yeah, we may send some more. And so the question is going to be, what is his intent? Because you see, even when he answered that question, his heart wasn't in it. He wasn't saying, yes, we're going to do this and it's going to make a difference. He's just talking about some things that he might can do. We might send some Patriots. We might do some sanctions. He didn't even commit to either of those things. We're talking about it, as he said at the end of there. And just like in the soundbite we showed you from yesterday, it again is kind of sounded like he's trying to offload this onto Biden.
Ukraine situation, that's a Biden deal. It's not a Trump deal. I'm trying to get it finished off, settled, and we'll see. I don't know. I can't tell you whether or not that's going to happen.
Is it a priority?
Yeah, I'd like to see it happen. I don't want to see 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 soldiers killed every week. And you have other people, but for the most part, so far it's been mostly soldiers, and they're Ukrainian soldiers and they're also Russian soldiers. But it's 5,000 souls, and they're being killed every single week. So it's really higher than that now.
So he keeps on talking about the casualties and how that is anguishing to him, and he doesn't want to see all those people dying on either side of the line. He keeps again going back again to this whole issue of this is Biden's war. And he keeps saying a lot. That's not just on this one sound clip. Almost every time this subject is brought up in the recent days, that topic keeps coming up, which could imply that he is considering, hey, I'm going to walk away from this finally, even though he had talked about that in April and then sort of walked away from walking away, as the phrase went. Maybe he's going to go back to that because Trump is a pragmatic person. He's a transactional president, as we know, in virtually every category. And if he sees something he can't win, he's not just going to keep, wasting more resources in something, whether it's political resources or financial resources or military resources, as with our very limited number of interceptor missiles, if he thinks that it can't possibly succeed. And I mean, what sense would it make to continue to be given all this ammunition, weapons, and political capital on something that you can see is going to lose, and then you're going to lose the capital and you're going to lose the conflict on the ground? I think that he may again be reverting back to that situation where we're going to have to find an end to this, ugly or otherwise, and we'll see how that's going to go on. Now, there is some additional information that I got just this morning from some Ukraine sources. We're going to see that in just a second. First of all, Trump also, that first soundbite there was from President Trump talking about his phone call with Putin. This one, he is again talking about his call with Zelensky.
Yeah, we had a good call. We talked about different things, and we had a very good call. I think a very, very strategic call.
Are there plans to partner with Ukraine on conditions?
Well, we've been helping them, and we'll continue to help them. It's a pretty tough situation. We'll see what happens. I told you I was very unhappy with my call with President Putin, and it just seems like he wants to go all the way and just keep killing people. No good. It's not good. I wasn't happy with it.
So again, he's like, he wasn't happy with it, but if it's an answer you don't like, you don't have to be happy with it. But that also doesn't mean you can do something about it. If you don't have the leverage and the other side does, and even with everything you could bring to the table, i.e. sanctions, more military support, the other side can still outgun you. You don't have to be happy about it, but you may have to concede to the reality. And interesting, I thought it was an interesting selection of word that President Trump used in that call with Zelensky. He said we had a very strategic call. Okay, so we know from the readouts, because we showed you yesterday, shortly after that meeting, that Zelensky himself said, yes, we talked about the need for air interceptor missiles. We're going to have an exchange of personnel. Trump also said we may send some people over there. That was yesterday. And then now this one here, he says, yeah, we may send them some help with some interceptor missiles. And we thought that was a little puzzling, because why would you talk about sending missiles, air defense interceptor missiles, after you had just said earlier that because of for some of our personnel in the Pentagon and in the diplomatic corps, we don't have enough of them to be able to sustain us, and we can't keep giving them away to everybody else if it's going to cause us to go down. Why would you then, just days later, just because somebody made a phone call, talk about sending them more of those very categories of weapons? Nothing has changed in terms of our inventory. Nothing has changed in terms of the need to have America first, as Sean Parnell so emphatically talked about, unless maybe there was more to the story. Now, this is, I had this from a single source, so I can't vouch to the veracity of it right now, but given what has been said and what we can see, it is plausible. So we're going to continue to watch this. And that is that the claim is that during this phone call, that President Trump conveyed a ultimatum to Zelensky that he got from Vladimir Putin. And apparently Putin gave him these terms. He said, look, just give him these terms here, that this is what we want to have happen. The war has to come to an end. And either we're going to continue to fight until we win everything, or so goes the story, is that we might allow a negotiated end if these certain things are happening. And one of which is that Zelensky has to end martial law. and hold presidential elections. Now, we don't have to wait long to find out if this part's true, because in just 10 days from now, the current martial law decree will run out. And the way it works in the Ukrainian law, and it has since 2022, I forget the exact duration of it, 6 months, 4 months, 3 months, I can't remember, whatever the duration, it's relatively short. Every time it comes up, it has to be renewed, meaning they can't just say we're on martial law indefinitely and we'll get back to you later. They actually have to renew it every time. And so far, of course, they have. But because of the way the Constitution is written, they can't have presidential elections so long as martial law is in effect. And there's a whole host of things that goes along with that from the Ukraine side, that not having martial law would change a lot of the wartime rules that they have and things they can do in terms of forced mobilization, etc. But the Russians are saying you're going to have to end martial law and hold elections, according to this description here. We'll find out if that's the way it is. And apparently, Trump's deal, apparently also with Putin, is that if he agrees to that and agrees to hold elections, then I'm going to give him more air defense missiles until that time to limit the amount of damage. That's what is being reported is part of the deal, and why Trump would be giving him some of these interceptor missiles as long as he does this other part here. Otherwise, and that's why Trump didn't commit to doing it, only that we're going to talk about it, because I'm sure that in a phone call, Zelensky certainly is going to agree to a ceasefire, or isn't going to agree to end the martial law and agree to have elections, because that's what people have been trying to get him to do for years, and he's been unwilling every other time. What we don't know yet is it finally starting to dawn on Zelensky that even in his delusional state and his unwillingness to acknowledge reality, that it's imposing itself on him anyway. I mean, just in these last couple of shows that we put on for you here, the one that Gary showed you at the top of this show with all these destruction around the Kharkiv, and then the one from Kiev the other night, obviously right there in Zelensky's front yard. I mean, you don't have to see too many more of these to realize. And of course, this is not just a fire. It's not just a hit. This was on an important military facility. So this hurts a lot more. And I'm going to show you in just a second why this one hurts more than just the imagery that's going on here. But that imagery alone is quite compelling when you realize that with or without any more interceptors from the United States, you're not going to be able to stop this stuff. There's enough aerial attacks coming in from the Russian side that it's going to get through, no matter what. Maybe it's slightly lower density, but it's still going to get through, and you're still going to get this stuff because Russia can just fire. If you have 5 interceptor missiles for a given target, they'll fire 10 drones. And if you have 10 interceptor missiles, they'll fire 20 drones. I mean, they're going to get through to their intended targets because they have the resources, because they have the ability and the missiles themselves and the production capacity to keep cranking them out. That's the situation here. Now that's at the strategic level here. And interesting, you talked about the delusionary issue of Zelensky. The day before this phone call, he still is showing he has no interest and no thought process whatsoever in ending the war. In fact, he's trying to ramp up business as though he thinks that there is something to do on the other side of a victory.
Я дякую всім компаніям і підприємцям, які підтримують український захист, які підтримують українську стійкість. Ми сьогодні говорили про те, що важливо, коли компанії виходять з російського ринку і працюють саме тут, в Україні. Ми також будуємо нову мережу співпраці з Америкою та багатьма іншими країнами на основі спільних можливостей у розвитку промисловості, технологічних секторів.
So you can certainly see there. I mean, that's something that you would do if you were the victor. That's something that you would do after you were fighting a war and maybe it had come to end on a negotiated settlement. Maybe you'd won something like that, where basically, okay, the war is over here, and now that we're going to start rebuilding our country, we're going to rebuild our economy. So I need to bring in, people that can help us do it. And I think we showed you that a picture the other day, a couple of days ago, about all the different companies that were in this big circle that Gary's showing you right here. And it wasn't just defense contractors. It wasn't just folks who were going to build missiles and bombs and that kind of thing, but also McDonald's, MasterCard, just several other regular companies. And that is just bizarre. Yeah, that's the one right there. So, you've got McDonald's, MasterCard, Boeing, of course, GM Holding, IBM, just any number of things here. Cisco Systems. Listen, you can do that kind of thing if you have an end of a war. But when you're on the losing end of it and it's continuing to go against you, this is bizarre. Now, it's bizarre too for these companies to have gone. I'm not sure what their intent was, because they should be able to just, I don't know, read the room or a little bit, or read a map, I guess. That would help if they're looking at a map. I don't know. It's just bizarre that why so many people in the West are so detached from reality, while the Russians are just myopically and locked in focused on winning a tactical and an operational and strategic military victory. Whether that conversation between Putin and Trump actually included an ultimatum for Ukraine that Trump passed along, only time will tell on that. But what we know from what Putin has said publicly and openly, he said we're going to have a negotiated end that we're satisfied with, or we will win a military victory on the battlefield. Plain as day. Nebenzia said it. Sergei Lavrov said it. All the key Russian folks are emphatic about saying it. If people are listening, and it almost appears that they don't, or else that we're still, as I think Commodore Jeremy has said several times, the West is operating on a narrative and the Russians are operating on reality. And maybe it's as simple as that. It's hard for me to cognitively understand how, despite one's preference and what we'd like to see happen, that we just keep detaching ourselves from reality and clinging to this fiction in light of an advancing Russian. And that's what I want to focus on in the remainder of this show here, is on the tactical level. Because it's one thing for all these bombs to be going in targets, because that you can blow up a lot of stuff, but if you don't have a man on the ground, you still don't own anything. The Ukraine side still owns that city that got hit there. But on the other hand, if there is an army advancing, if you are coming up, then at some point you're not going to be able to have your own preference anymore. You're not going to be able to maintain any fiction. And we're starting to get into that situation right now. Now, I want to show you a bit of an extended clip here from our good friend Alex at History Legends, who we've had on the show a few times, and hopefully we can get back again very soon. He's putting out some magnificent stuff here of late. But he has another, and by the way, go to his show. I think it was just released yesterday on the tactical situation here. It's an excellent show that's, I think, 35, 40 minutes, something like that. Definitely worth your time. But I'm going to show you one piece here on a specific area, because in my view, this is the most important area on the entire tactical battlefield. More important than Sumy, more important than Kharkiv, more important than Zaporizhia. And that is Pokrovsk. If Pokrovsk falls, then I think that the whole defense could become unhinged. I think this is right now the fight for the entire war, because if you win this one, I think everything else can get rolled up, and you're going to see why in this small clip.
Because on the 27th of June, Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Alexander Syrsky, reported that Russia is concentrating its largest group of personnel in that direction, a force numbering 110,000 troops. That's 50% more than the entire British ground forces. Let that sink in for a second. Oh yeah, remember what I said in one of my last videos about Pokrovsk. But there's a second option for the Russian army. That is to jump on a defensive mode around Pokrovsk, while they shift their focus on the eastern side of the city. From there, they could push an open field towards the large urban area of Novo-Ekonomichne, from where they could start a grinding battle, house by house, towards Pokrovsk. This is exactly what is happening right now. Just kidding, it's actually worse. At the moment, the situation is critical because between 20 and 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers are facing encirclement. Starting in May, the Russian armed forces opened the breach along the TO-504 highway and now hold a 35-kilometer salient east of Pokrovsk. We can talk of an operational masterpiece, and you'll understand why in a minute. The Russians are wielding a big bulge that they could swing in any direction. As we speak, Russian storm detachments are currently carrying a wide-flanking maneuver westwards. I'll make another video with more details about this operation. But what you have to understand right now is how the Russians are not getting bogged down in street-by-street battles. Instead, they're simply bypassing these urban areas. And by doing so, they also bypass most of Ukraine's strongholds. The operational objective of this orc doctrine seems to be Rodinske. That was a situation in that sector on June 1st, plus 9 kilometers in a month. It's absolutely insane. The first step will be to take control of the Kazeni-Tariets River, as well as the villages of Raziny, Novotarietske, Mayak, and maybe even Novoekonomichne. Then comes this set of industrial areas and mines that can act as tactical bulwarks for Ukraine. At last, if the Russians thrust even deeper all the way to the Golden Point, they'll reach the 205-15 road and the settlement of Radinske.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you on a map why that's critical in just a minute. But first of all, actually, let me show you on a map that area and why this is all important, how it's all tied together. You have the in the northern here, that video that Garrett showed you at the outset here from the strike last night. That's right here in Chuhiv, in this area here. There's Kharkiv right here, and this is the location of where that struck. And it was in an industrial section here, which had been used as a logistics hub for the defense for the Ukraine side of the Kharkiv area. That's been here for well over a year and a half up here. And then this new one that's been coming in here where the Russians are now starting a new penetration into the Kharkiv Oblast. And now then they've hit this area back here, and they've been doing the same thing in other places. This is just the most dramatic images that we've had that we're able to show. But you see that Russia up in the northern part of the Eastern Front is now starting to make more and more inroads here. And you see these penetrations are starting to go deeper into the Ukraine side here. Now, on top of this, there's been additional operations here, especially in the Volchansk area. And you see these two, they're starting to expand this bridgehead a little bit. At the same time, they're expanding these two white areas here are just from last night, which I think we told you in our last tactical update. So they're continuing to expand that. So you see Russia's putting pressure all across the front line in these areas, all here. And that if Russia continues to push forward in here, another uncertainty for the Ukraine side. Will they push in here and then expand along these penetrations here to cut off this whole arc right here on the northeastern part? Or will they push forward in the Volchansk area in here and to move toward this city here, which is kind of along the reservoir, which could then also isolate the entire area? So we don't know, but Russia is successfully moving up, and the Ukraine side is not able to stop them. Now let's run down to the Pokrovsk area and why it's so vital. Because Russia is doing this kind of action up here, and because even in the Sumy area, where the Russians have come down after they retook the Kursk area, so that's continuing. That you see that they're continuing to have fights here, even though Russia's not making a lot of progress in this particular area, but the fight's going on. The fight's going on here in the Kharkiv area. Now a new one, and then in the Kupyansk area, also up here. That means that Ukraine can't move reserves from down here up into there. And now we get into the issue of Pokrovsk. And now you may recall that toward the end of last year, from, I don't know, September, October of 2024 through the end of the year, there was a big push where the Russians had pushed on. They took Selidova and then all these other towns, Shevchenko, they moved up, and it looked like they were going to move straight onto Pokrovsk. And at that time, the Ukraine side did move a lot of reinforcements down, and they beefed up their defenses here and brought this, at least the frontal assault, to pretty much halt. And then Russians said, okay, let's maybe go around the flank. So they started moving in this direction. Again, Ukraine moved in some reinforcements. They built some more defensive fortifications. And now then there's positional warfare going on here, but not a lot. Well, it appears then that Russia has put for priority on going in from the flank up here. And you just saw Alex talk about Rodinsky and why that's so important. So here's the fortress city of Pokrovsk. And then you also heard him talk about how Russia is learning tactically, and why I say that they are prioritizing tactical advancements and to defend and limit their casualties. So they're not going into a lot of these urban areas and built-up areas and taking it block by block and house by house, as they have in some of the other areas and they have done in the past. Now they're bypassing a lot of those and just isolating them and moving forward. So now then that causes obviously a lot less casualties for the attackers, because now that in some of these urban areas, if you bypass them and you don't spend the troops, you have to rest out the defenders house by house, room by room, you just move past it and cut off the resupply. Now then you put the defenders in a position where they either run out of ammunition and weapons and money, food and even water. And then they have to either withdraw or they are surrounded and they have to surrender. So that's what Russia is prioritizing right now. And you see then how close, even since Alex made that film, now then here in this, they've actually moved into this village right here, and you see this penetration moving straight toward Rodensky. He mentioned the road there that would have, and why that was. Let me show you why that's so important. If Russia is able to move the remaining distance right here and take Rodensky, then they're going to have this main route that's going to be cut off here for resupply. That's going to then leave only this one over here to reinforce the whole city of Pokrovsk. Once Russia has this, then you can see this whole area is in a cauldron here. And according to what the information that Alex has found, that's somewhere around 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers are in there. And I would imagine that Russia, once they get to and take Rodensky and cut off this road here, then they would probably turn back again to the pressure here to move and to try to cut off this one. Once these two roads are cut off, there is virtually no way that the Ukrainian side can keep its 20,000 troops fed and ammunition and all the things that they would need just to continue providing defense. And they would basically choke it off. If this gets taken here, folks, this could literally roll up the entire defense for the Ukraine side. Just imagine if this whole thing is taken here. Remember, we talked to you about an operation in the Zaporizhia area here where Russia is also putting pressure on in this particular area here, moving up to try to cut off the rail bridge or the rail lines from Zaporizhia also to Pokrovsk. But if this one gets cut off here, now then Russia can move its other troops either to this area in the south or back up into the Kharkiv area in the north, and you see things keep getting rolled up. But if they actually have a breakthrough here, and we've shown you some comments here from just earlier in this week that Russia has apparently large numbers of reserves that have not yet been employed, and some of them are in the northern part of the country, up in the Belarus area. Some are in the other parts of their occupied zones here. Some are actually in the Russian areas. But if they get a breakthrough, they can very rapidly move folks by rail and road networks into this area, and then they can exploit those pretty rapidly. Russia has big reserves. Ukraine doesn't. So once, especially if you lose a 20,000 person accommodation, you can see that it's not much longer. So it could well be, this is again goes back to what President Trump is reported to have said to Zelensky on his phone call, that listen, the end is coming in now inside. You give missiles or no missiles. All I can do is slow down the air attacks. That's the best that we can get done. If we don't do anything and we just keep on with the fiction, you see that the Russian onslaught is continuing. This is the continuation of their summer offensive. They have the resources, they have the ammunition, they have the weapons, they have the weapon systems, they have the personnel, they have the air capability, they have the air defense. There has been also overnight some attacks on the Russian side of the line, where Ukraine is also doing its best to interdict onto the Russian ability to enforce, especially in the Kharkiv area, where they're trying to, where they're having that offensive. The Ukraine side is trying with their drones and missiles to also interdict, and some of those are getting through. There was an attack in Saratov and the Ingles Air Base overnight, which had struck some targets, but there are too few of them. They don't have the ability to launch a wave of 500 in 2 out of 3 nights, and then in another large one, and to maintain that. The Ukraine side can't do it. And you see that if anyone wants to get hope from that Ukraine is doing that, well, you have to look at what's happening on the Ukraine side when Russia does have overwhelming capabilities in the air. It's diminishing Ukraine's ability, but it's not knocking them out of the war. And if you see that on the vastly larger Russian landmass, and you see that you have a tiny fraction of the number of missiles and drones that can get through and cause damage, you can understand why that's not going to knock Russia out of anything. And that's been going on for 3 years, and especially here in the last, say, 9 months or 6 months or so, Ukraine has really stepped up its attempt to attack into Russia, and they've had some success. But you see, it has no impact on the front, because Russia has calculated that into their operation, and that's how wars work. You get hit, you hit, and you just have to work around it. But Russia has so many more assets, and that's why we keep getting back to you time after time. This is a war of attrition. And the expectation is in a war of attrition, I'm going to get hit. I'm going to lose some troops. I'm going to lose some assets and some facilities on my side. But it's the side that has the most capability to do it to the other side that's going to end up winning the war. And right now, there is no question that Russia is on the ascendancy, meaning they're still improving. The balance is continuing to move out of whack against the Ukraine side and for the Russian side. And it could be, and I certainly hope that it is, that President Trump is finally coming to acknowledge this, and he's setting the stage to say, hey, this is Biden's war, it's not mine, so I'm going to get out of it. So he's going to try and deflect any blame for it by putting it on the previous administration. He's trying to make this deal with Zelensky. And again, we could know within 10 days whether that's true or not, because if he signs an extension of the moratorium of the martial law, then either that wasn't the case with what was reported, or that Zelensky is just not going to be willing to do anything. And then it'll be interesting if they do extend it. Then what will we see Trump do? Because he may go back to what he was starting to do in April and just walk away. Don't know whether he will or not, but those are some of the things that we're going to be watching for. And those are some indicators as to where this may be going. But hear me clearly, if the Western/Ukraine side continues to ignore reality and continue to pretend like it's business as usual and we can actually have business and making plans for all this kind of stuff without addressing the elephant in the room, or the bear in this case, that's continuing to advance up here. And you see that even the linchpin of all this defense, the Pokrovsk area, is increasing damage. And Gary, I had sent you a full screen. I don't remember if we talked about it. If you have that on there, it shows the amount of territory being lost by the month. Do we have that one handy? I didn't talk about it and see if we have it loaded up. If not, we'll just continue to go on with it. Or even if I remember to send it. Sorry, I was kind of in a hurry getting ready for this show this morning. But you can just see graphically what's happening with how much territory is being lost just in 2025. And if I didn't send it, Gary, I think I might be able to pull that one in myself. Let me do that for us real quick, because it is kind of important to see. Because when you see this graphically put on there, it kind of throws things into a lot more relief, that you can say, oh yeah, I mean, this is not just claims. This is actually what's happening. And here this is right here. This is 2025 by the month. And you see that in January, they still were taking a fair amount. It had come down a little bit since November, the previous November, and then it reached a low in March, but only a low, didn't go away. And then it started picking back up in April, then more than double that in May, then up to 556 square kilometers of territory taken by Russia. And then now here we are in July, where it's apparently on the same trajectory and may actually increase. And you can see just in that, especially in that short clip I showed you there from Alex from History Legend, he was showing you in just 30 days how much territory had been lost, 9 kilometers in that area. And that's the most important area here. So that shows you where Russia's putting its priority. So you can understand that's their priority of effort. That is what they consider to be the main effort of their operations in the special military operation right now. And Ukraine recognizes it, but so far they haven't been able to stop it. They can slow it down, but they can't stop it. And that also reinforces something we showed you on July 1st from Julian Ripka, where he admitted that, listen, the big problem is the weak spot that he said the Russians seem to have discovered is that the Ukraine side just doesn't have enough density of men. They have like 12 men over a kilometer or something like that. I can't remember the exact terminology, but he said that there's just too few of them. There's too few in a village, so Russia can just take them one after another. And now you see it graphically playing out on the battlefield. This is the truth, folks. I know a lot of people who are, all for Ukraine and are big defenders of what they is and don't like Russia. I can understand why people would think all those things and why you may have that viewpoint. But there does come a point to where you have to acknowledge reality, even if it's something that you detest, even if it's something you loathe, you gnash your teeth, to continue to go towards your preferred outcome, to continue having a policy based on a narrative, means that the people that you say that you care about and that you want to succeed will continue to die unnecessarily. They will continue to die in large numbers. They will continue to lose ground. Everything that the defenders of Ukraine say they want to accomplish, they are perversely enabling them to lose. Because if they took the ugly deal that's been on the table for a while now, the killing can stop. President Trump is right. The killing can stop. The loss of territory can stop. It's going to come at a high price, especially politically. No question about it. That's just a fact. But to resist that, to refuse to do that and say, no, that's surrendering. That's rewarding aggression. I hear this all the time. They've been saying it really from the beginning. Anytime somebody talks about a negotiated settlement, you'll be rewarding aggression. And then they'll just keep coming. That's a theoretical situation. I'm talking about what is real. And the cost to people following that path and saying, no, we can't do this because it'll reward aggression, then what you are doing is that you are imposing a cost, an irrecoverable cost on the very people that you say you want to defend. Because by going toward this unobtainable objective of not rewarding aggression, so-called, then you reward the aggressor by saying you can keep going because we won't stop of our own accord, and you'll keep killing everybody in your path. You'll keep destroying all these cities in the path, and they'll take more and more territory. And then it won't be 4 oblasts, folks. It won't be the 4 regions that are apparently still on the table. It will be 6, 8, maybe 10, maybe all the way to the Dnieper River. And if even that doesn't cause the Ukraine side to give, then they may then also put siege to Kiev. And this time for real. The first time they did it in February 2022, it was just a show of force, really. And they just hoped that the presence of tanks and all this kind of stuff would scare the Ukraine side into surrendering. I think that was their intention. That was their plan A. They weren't resourced for plan B. We'll talk about that another day, have in the past. But if they come back this time, folks, there will be a plan B, and it will be resourced ahead of time. And you see them building up right now. Julian Rivka also talked that somewhere between 12 and 15 divisions of Russian combat power are being built through the remainder of planned on the remainder of 2025. That could be a big indicator that Russia is also planning on this. Russia may be physically planning and resourcing an operation. It says, we don't think that Zelensky's going to do the right thing, or he's going to do the logical thing, maybe a better way to put it, and that they're resourcing and preparing, and that includes ammunition of all the different categories, drones, artillery shells, air defense missiles, air offense missiles, etc., glide bombs, the whole thing, for a big showdown in the first part of 2026. They may be doing that. And if you see those resources and those are real, then that increases even more the rational logic to say, let's bring this to an end. Let's shut this down now before it gets too further and you lose the whole country, because that's entirely possible. Let's hope it doesn't get to that. Let's hope that what President Trump is doing is bringing an end to this right now, ushering in an ugly defeat for the Ukraine side, but ends the killing and stops the forward progress of the Russian military. That's probably the only thing that can stop the Russians at this point. We'll see what happens. We may not have to wait very long. Like I said, maybe about 10 days or so. But in the meantime, we're going to keep you updated every
Once again, the resources of the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC.
Trump in the DRC.
Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda signed a peace agreement.
Welcome to JBS Deep Dive. I'm Najma Minhas. Donald Trump is back in the headlines, now on Africa. And what's he doing there could reshape the global power map. Because this isn't just about charity or peacekeeping, although he is asking for the Nobel Prize for his work here as well. But more on that later. It's about who controls the $2 trillion of minerals that power the modern world, from AI weapons to electric vehicles. With the West seeking alternatives in battery supply chains, Africa's resource-rich nations are no longer peripheral. They are pivotal. And right now, that fight is centered in Congo, where Trump just brokered a peace agreement between Rwanda and the DRC. Now, it may sound like just another African conflict, but it's not. This is about beating China at his own game, securing strategic leverage, and opening up a new American frontier. Stay with me, because what's happening in Africa might just decide who controls the 21st century. Let's look at Congo specifically. North Kivu, where the latest fighting was concentrated, the rebel group M23, which is a largely ethnic Tutsi group, which re-emerged in 2021. By late 2022, they had seized key towns like Bunagana and Rutshuru. The DRC government blames Rwanda for backing this group. It's a claim that's been supported by the United Nations reports and has been confirmed by the United States' own intelligence reports in March 2023. However, the Trump administration has signed a ceasefire aiming to end a decades-old conflict, which is rooted in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. The two African countries' foreign ministers signed the agreement on June the 27th, pledging to implement a 2024 deal that would see Rwandan troops withdraw from eastern Congo within 90 days. However, there is a little fact that's been ignored, which is that so far, the rebel group M23 has not come on board in this ceasefire, although Qatar is said to be working on that as well. But leaving that aside for the moment, this agreement is not just about rebels or saving lives. It's about what lies beneath the soil. Look carefully at this chart, and it will explain a lot immediately. Congo produces over 13% of the world's copper, 17% of the industrial diamonds, and 45% of the global tantalum, and 74% of global cobalt. Congo holds over 70% of the world's cobalt reserves, which are essential for lithium-ion batteries that we use in our EVs, in smartphones, and those military systems. However, the DRC produces virtually none of the world's refined cobalt, the mineral which is used in these final products. Most of the world's refined cobalt is actually made in China, as you can see on the chart. 76% of it, followed by a very distant 10% of it in Finland. Each smartphone battery that we have uses approximately 8 grams of cobalt. This cobalt is a critical material in the lithium-ion batteries that power the devices, enabling high energy density, longevity, and safety of that battery. And because of the sheer volumes of the phones produced globally, it means that, for example, in 2022, mobile phones were the largest application of cobalt in portable electronics. They consumed around 27,000 metric tons globally, which is almost 10% of all cobalt produced yearly. Congo is also rich in coltan, which yields tantalum, a rare metal used in missile systems, AI chips, and high-performance electronics. Remember, I recently spoke about this in my vlog on how China may be inadvertently helping Iran and its war against Israel because of the tantalum that comes from Congo, which is needed in military jets, such as those fighter jets. The global demand for cobalt is projected to quadruple by 2030, driven by the green tech and defense sectors. Although less of that demand will now be coming from the United States, thanks to the OBBB. Remember, the one big beautiful bill that Donald Trump's administration has just passed, which reduces credits for renewable energy and is being severely criticized by Elon Musk. However, unsurprisingly, primary demand is from the Chinese, given its lead in green technologies, cars, solar power, and so on. The United States imports over 80% of its cobalt, most of it from overseas. So whoever controls those mines controls the future of technology. Now that's the real war which is being fought in Congo. Like that recent United States-Ukraine minerals agreement, this United States DRC deal aligns those resources along with political objectives. Washington is ensuring supply chain resilience along with security and supposedly stability for the countries involved. But we all know it's not that easy. When the Chinese signed a deal in 2008 for $9 billion of those minerals, Western media called it Chinese colonization. Now, when Donald Trump signs this deal for $2 trillion, around 200 times larger, it's called national security and stability. Let's talk about China, because Trump always is.
China, 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 China.
Since 2015, China has poured over $10 billion into the DRC's mining sector. Chinese firms like Zijin Mining, the SCMOC, and China Non-Ferrous Metal control around 15 of Congo's 19 major cobalt projects. Over 60% of the DRC's cobalt exports go to China. And China doesn't just mine. They own the whole processing chain. It gives them a near monopoly control over tantalum and cobalt exports. They've got a vertical dominance in that resource chain. I discussed the silent control that China has in the war. And as I said, Congo is not just a conflict zone, it's a global chessboard. Whoever controls its minerals controls the flow of power, technology, and warfare in the 21st century. Right now, China has the advantage. The United States under Biden responded very slowly. He set up a mineral security partnership in 2022 on which not much was done. Talked with various allies, but really had no serious presence on the ground. What's been Trump's move? Well, he's been cut right to the line. He's made the deal. He secured the assets. If he stabilizes Eastern Congo and aligns Kagame, he aims to open a backdoor into the most strategic mineral zone on Earth. Now, the president has been pushing for the United States to reduce its reliance on Beijing's control of rare earth and critical minerals. So Trump's peace push isn't about peace at all. It's about building a United States-controlled corridor for cobalt and tantalum. Private security contracts and supply chain logistics into East Africa and the Indian Ocean. Basically, resource warfare through backdoor diplomacy. That was his real aim. The Nobel Peace Prize is just a sideshow. Now, this is where most people stop listening. But here's where it really gets even more strategic. The problem with the United States over the decades of being this hyperpower, hegemonic power, call it what you want, is that Africa has never really been a strategic focus for it. For a short time, during the Cold War period, it invested heavily in Africa to counter Soviet influence, particularly in Congo, but also in Angola, Ethiopia, and Somalia. The United States engagement in Congo dramatically declined after the collapse of the Mobutu regime in 1997, and he was in power for almost 30 years. He was installed by the CIA to be the US proxy in Central Africa to contain communism. And we know this as they've revealed it themselves in their declassified files. A small side note, during Mobutu's period, the Democratic Republic of Congo used to be called Zaire. But once the Soviet Union dissolved, the United States was no longer interested in the region. It was no longer interested in Mobutu, and they started pushing for a democratic dispossession. It lost all interest in the continent. US resources were diverted to wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. In the meantime, by the early 2000s, Chinese mining companies began quietly acquiring small stakes in copper and cobalt mines. And in 2008, China and the DRC signed a landmark deal, known as the Sai-Comines deal, where China would invest $6 billion in roads, hospitals, railways, and infrastructure. And in exchange, it would get rights to mine 10 million tons of copper and 600,000 tons of cobalt over the next 25 years. China is the largest consumer of cobalt globally. Over 30% of all cobalt produced goes to China, and most of it from the DRC. For China, Congo is more than a mine. It's part of its Africa strategy, trade, raw materials, and long-term soft power. And it helps China undercut the United States and the EU dominance in critical supply chains. And crucially, it's a way for them to shape the next era of global infrastructure and battery technology as well. By 2009, China had become Africa's top infrastructure, and investment partner. China's become Africa's largest trading partner, with trade reaching over $282 billion in 2023. 3 weeks ago, while Donald Trump was busy making calls and taking calls from Bibi Netanyahu about how to bomb Iran, the Chinese president was signing the China-Africa Changsha Declaration in June 2025. He was holding a summit with African leaders about deepening cooperation and reasserting Africa's alignment with China. The summit, while reinforcing infrastructure ties, also introduced new cooperation areas, including AI and digital finance and green energy partnerships. And while Donald Trump imposed tariffs on some of the poorest countries in the world on Liberation Day in April, the Chinese put together the opposite deal. They announced they would remove all tariffs on exports from 53 African nations. Earlier in Beijing in September 2024, President Xi Jinping hosted the FOCAC summit, which was attended by 53 African leaders. China pledged $50 billion in financing and modernization partnerships for 2025 to 27. The FOCAC summit, which is the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, is China's premier diplomatic platform for engaging all African nations collectively. It began in the year 2000 and is held every 3 years, with a summit meeting alternating between Beijing and an African capital. By comparison, the most recent United States President Summit with African leaders was held by President Biden in December 2022, and before that in 2014 with President Obama. I could go on and on, because this isn't just about one deal or one summit. This is the result of long-term patient strategic engagement by China across the African continent. Let's be clear, Beijing isn't doing this out of the goodness of its own heart. Of course not. But what it's not doing is swooping in with a quick fix, slapping a fragile peace over a complex war just to grab some minerals and leave. Instead, it's embedded deep in the very infrastructure of Africa. China's Huawei and ZTE are the drivers of its digital future. China's even in the chicken production system. Now, you may call that ambition or strategy or even imperialism, but it's not a hit and run. Here today, gone tomorrow, for which the United States is renowned for. So you can guess how easy it will be for the US to displace the Chinese from the mineral sector in Congo. Not likely would be my thought. Now, coming back to the so-called peace being brokered by the United States, the Congolese president, tired of instability in his country and knowing that Trump's desire for minerals, and having seen that deal that the United States did with the Ukrainians, put a very tempting offer on the table. He wants US boots and hardware on the ground in exchange for extraction rights. However, Trump respects strong men, and Paul Kagame of Rwanda, who has been long supported by the United States establishment, fits that mode. He has military discipline and is unapologetically strategic, and is also said to like dollars as well. That always helps. Now, Kagame may see Trump as being far more transactional and efficient than the Western liberals, a potential fast track to secure investment without any moral lectures. Together, the two of them could bypass bureaucracy and reshape the regional order. But here's the catch. Peace could actually cost Rwanda a lot of money. Despite having limited natural resources, Rwanda exports hundreds of millions of dollars worth of tantalum, tin, gold, and tungsten. And guess where it comes from? Not Rwanda, but smuggled from conflict zones in eastern Congo. Kagame's government has invested heavily in mineral refineries and logistics infrastructure that depends on this illicit flow of Congolese ore. If peace were fully implemented, with Kinshasa regaining control of mining routes and exports, Rwanda would lose a major source of revenue and a geopolitical tool. So while Kagame may welcome the peace, it's unlikely to be the kind of peace that cuts Rwanda out of the mineral economy. What Kagame is more likely to do is to support a managed instability, just enough to justify a presence, but not enough to provoke international backlash. This will become a very interesting fight between China and the United States. And the chances are those mineral rights, they will remain a gimmick for US population and for the president to sell back home. Domestically, this is pure campaign gold. Trump gets to say, I stopped a war that Biden ignored. I beat China without firing a shot. I reopened Africa for American industry. Evangelicals will see him as supporting the Christians in Rwanda, and strategists will love him for a short while at least for reasserting United States global relevance.
Here that immigrated to America from the continent, and he just taking issue with the issues in this country with the 14th Amendment. I don't know what it is about people that immigrate here. They really feel that they can be speaking on our history, our culture, and everything else. I don't get it, because I've been to several countries and our FBAs do not get involved with anybody's stuff. They don't. I don't see them get involved in any politics. I don't see them speaking on their personal issues. FBA just come in there, be respectful. They enjoy themselves. Even the ones that live there, right? They're not getting involved in any of their politics. But when it comes to the immigrants in this country, they feel like they got a right to get involved with our politics. They don't even know what they're talking about a lot of times. Case in point, I want you to hear what this brother, and I use that very loosely, how he talking. I want you to hear what he has to say.
Okay. So, ever since Trump passed what he passed, right? The whole 6-3 judges and all that. I see a lot of FBA coming online celebrating, saying, turn in your passport, saying it's time for you to go home, saying Trump just solidified indigenous Black Americans and their rights to the land and all that. So I'm just wondering, like, does this mean we have been arguing with dumb people called FBA? Because the whole basis of the argument was you said you're not African. You said you're indigenous to the land. You said you were here before the white man showed up with slaves. So why are you celebrating about an executive order, 14th Amendment, that was passed for slave children of slaves? I thought you're not from Africa, you're indigenous. So how are you a child of a slave then? How? You guys will celebrate anything, even your demise. I swear to God, you Black Americans, anything the white man says, right? Contrary to Africans or any other person, you celebrate. Even if it is at your own detriment, you celebrate. Now FBAs are celebrating 14th Amendment for slave kids. And they say they were not slaves, they are indigenous. You guys need a hug, bro. You need a hug.
The lack of understanding with some people that immigrate here, or just some people in general, is horrible. Okay, sir, let's go ahead and try to educate you, even though you're getting involved in things that's not your business. Even though when FBAs go to your homeland, we would never get involved in your business. We have first of all, we have no right to be in your personal business or anything because we're not of your history. We're not of your lineage. If we're there, we're just enjoying ourselves, right? We're going on vacation. We're enjoying the food, we hanging out with the people. We're just having a good time. We're not even trying to put ourselves in the mix. We got some businesses over there. Okay, we're running our business. That's that. But if you understood American history, you know that, yes, the transatlantic slave trade happened. Correct. My ancestors came through the transatlantic slave trade. There was some who was already here. They were put into slavery too. So whether if they were already here or they came through the transatlantic slave trade, they were put into slavery if they look like me. Okay. And they was on those plantations, sir, for about 250 years. And after the emancipation of Black people in this land, there was a group of people, almost about 4 million in total. They're just basically here roaming the land. So then they had to make a decision. What are we going to do with all these people? We want to ship them back to Africa. And Lincoln and them was trying to say, hey, if you want to go back, you can. And some people did go back. They went to particularly Liberia. But then, of course, we know Lincoln was, his life was taken. He was assassinated. They immediately shut that off real quick. And eventually down the line, they did the 14th Amendment because it was much easier to keep Black people here than ship 4 million people back to the African continent. Okay. So the children of slaves, those who came off those plantations were the children of slaves. They were slaves themselves. they have a 14th Amendment, okay, of the U.S. Constitution. The 13th Amendment, which, ended slavery, at least private-owned slavery, transferred to state slavery. The 14th Amendment was made us citizens of the United States of America. The 15th Amendment, they gave us like voting rights and things like that, right? 13, 14, and 15 are for Black Americans. Now, that's just to give you just a little history. But even if you don't understand the history, why are you worrying about what anybody online is saying to you, sir? What I would be worrying about, beyond with you, is your status okay? Because look, you can always shut people off online. Listen, you get off these phones and get off the app, you won't hear nothing the FBA is telling you. I promise you that. I have pages where people are talking all the time. Some pages I'm looking at religiously, some I don't look at all. I just make the content and go on by my business. Maybe I'll go back and check it here and there, right? But arguing with FBAs online, making videos of FBAs online is not going to fix your status. The fact is, FBAs are American citizens. They're not immigrants. I know some of you thought that, but we're not immigrants. We can't be rounded up by ICE in droves. No, we can't. And see, people like yourself, sir, that's what we're talking about. See, because they have some people may say, well, Phil, they legitimately say this. Well, Phil, he talking about, FBA and immigrants and this and that and the third. The ones I'm talking about, brother or sister who are immigrant here and love what I do, I'm not talking about you. You the one I want to stay here, right? If you're on code, brother from Africa, the Caribbean, you're on code, brother or sister from Latin America. You understand what I'm saying? If you a Blasian person, right? If you a Black Arab or wherever you come from and you Black like me and you on code with us, I want you to stay. I want you to duck Trump. I want you to duck ICE. I want you to be here. But the ones like this guy in this video, that's the ones I want ICE to come get. People like Myron Gaines, I want ICE to come get him. You get where I'm going? If you're on code, brother or sister, you all right with me. But it's those like that who are all these politicians, right? Like the Ilhan Omars. People like that, yeah, they can go and get her out of here too. But if you're on code with us, I want you to stay. This guy is completely disrespectful. He has no right to be speaking on our lineage. He has no right to be speaking on the 14th Amendment. He don't know anything. He don't know enough. He ain't been here long enough to know anything. That's what we're talking about. And what it is that he's made videos talking crap, and other Black Americans are checking him on that and see what it is. They're not used to Black Americans drawing that boundary and say, you're not going to disrespect me. Because if you go to his homeland, I know what I'm telling you. I've been to African countries. They would not allow me, you, or anybody to go to their country and start talking crazy about their laws, their history, their lineage, their politics. The first thing they will tell you is say, hey, hold on. Okay, we cool you here, but you're a foreigner. You don't know enough to talk about our history. You're not even a citizen. So why are you getting involved? You're offending people. You understand? They will tell you that quick or in the continent of Africa. And I don't take an issue with them saying that, because that would be the honest truth. When I went to Ethiopia, I didn't go speaking on their issues. When I did the interview with Sister Miriam or Mama Africa, I didn't talk down about their government. I say, hey, I see what Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, he's done to the city. It looked good. Any criticism they got about him, that's not my business. All I'm gonna do is speak on what the good he's doing, right? I said, man, shout out to the Prime Minister. That's it. I'm not getting involved with nothing. Even they told me, Phil, this going on, that going on. I'm like, okay, well, I need to get an Ethiopian to speak on this. I'm not speaking on it because I'm not an Ethiopian. If I'm going to Kenya, if I'm going to Nigeria, wherever, they complaining on their people, you do it, because that's part of your history, your heritage. It wouldn't even be right for me to be talking, even on my African Diaspora News channel. don't you notice I don't really dive too much into their politics? Not because I don't know about it. I study their politics all the time. Now, I would get into it if it's connected to the United States. Then I'm going to start talking about it. This is the reason why I have African journalists on that platform. So they can talk about the issues in the continent because they live there. They're there every day. You understand? And I think it would be better coming from them than coming from me sitting in America. Because that's called respecting people. You feel me? Now, this guy is the type that like to be disrespectful, just based on his tone. This is the type that try to tell you that, oh, well, we do better, which when you really break down what you mean that you do better, they really ain't done nothing. I mean, yeah, I guess you're doing better than what you probably would have done when you come from. But in relation to Black Americans, you haven't even scratched the surface. And then when they try to compare themselves, they compare themselves to people who are low income in our community. They don't compare themselves to even the middle class Black people, the upper middle class, the higher class. They never compare them to those Black people. They always try to compare it to people that's struggling. If you got to put yourself against somebody who's struggling, that means you ain't done too much. Right? So when they tell you we're doing better, well, on paper, we're doing better. It really don't, like the old people say, it really don't amount to a hill of beans when they say that. But I can see definitely why brothers and sisters are getting on him because he just so disrespectful. So yes, FBAs will be clapping if he gets deported. Sure. Oh, yes. You better believe that. But to the on-code brothers and sisters that rock with us, they respect us, they respect our lineage, they respect everything about us, and we respect them. Yes, I want them to stay. Bottom line, I want them here. Sure enough. All the Haitians, that's cool. I want them to be here. The Jamaicans, you know what I'm saying? All the different African groups. I want everybody to stay if you're on code. Because, hey, look, this is your time. Now, to people that's on code, let me tell you about this. This is your time to really unify with Black Americans. Unify politically. Say, hey, Black Americans, we already cool with you, but we really about to work with you now, right? So, hey, how we need to vote? Who we need to vote for in this next election? Because we want to make sure that, because we know if y'all good, we going to be good. And that's just the truth. If Black Americans are good and get something, y'all going to get it as black immigrants. You feel me? There's no reason for Black immigrants to be against Black Americans. It don't make sense because you're going to benefit off of anything that we get. You benefiting off of what we fought for already now. So let's unify together, work together, right? If you want to, I'm not begging you to, but work together. And the ones who are on code, of course, the ones that act like this dude here in the video, let ICE come pick him up. I'm cool with that. I'm really cool with that. It's not no xenophobia or nothing to say we don't want guys like him and Myron Gaines here. We don't need that here. They can take that back to the continent and deal with that over there. But get with FBAs. We also need you to get your politicians in line too. Your immigrant politicians, the ones that's talking about pro-immigration, not talking about pro-Black, because if they talk about pro-Black, since everybody want to be Black now, right? Everybody want to be Black. We all Black? Okay, we all Black. Now let's show that in action. Get your politicians, pull them to the side and say, hey, stop that immigration talk. We need to be talking Black, right? Period. Because we got to work together with the FBAs, because clearly we see we done messed up. So no, we got to course correct right now. And I told Black immigrants, you are the ones that can fix it pretty quick. You really could. Now, some people gonna say, no, you can't. Listen, that's some Black people just talking. One thing I know about Black people, because we were raised this way, we was raised to support anybody Black. Okay. So if you come right, you come correct, you on code anyway. You already known to be on code. Right, you from Jamaica, but you on code. Everybody know this about you, right? They're gonna say, yeah, that's my Jamaican brother, right? That's my Jamaican sister right there. That's how we feel about you. So get your politicians on code, get your communities on code, and then we can really do something as a community. Because this is y'all time. Look, them other groups outside of Black immigrants, they got a tougher time to deal with Black folk. But black immigrants can actually fix it like this. They really can. No matter what some black people tell you. I know, I'm trust because I know my people. Even guys like that's in your community, like in this video, get them in line too. Although, you know what? Say, hey, ICE, get him. I know where he at. He needs to go back. That's it. Because for too long, we dealt with too many guys like this in this video, being disrespectful. Guys like this getting political positions. Guys like this getting supervisor jobs and turned against us as black Americans. Guys like that saying there's no racism. What are y'all talking about? Racism? Y'all talk about race too much. Right? That's the kind of guy that would say that. Right there. And then now they're really seeing some racists in ICE, because there's some racists in ICE. And then they want to start crying now. Well, where's the FBAs? So yes. We are thoroughly want guys like him, Myron Gaines, and other ones out. You better believe it. But guys like him who's totally disrespectful, it will never be allowed in his homeland. And this is a new day. We will not allow disrespect, and you will be checked from the gate. We are gatekeeping too. We're not letting anybody just come into our culture and just coming in and do what you want to do. Them days are over. It is a new day, and you're gonna come to our door with respect, or if you come with disrespect, then you will be met with disrespect. It's just that simple. Whatever you give, you will get, and that's just what it is. Now, I know some of the brothers, some of you immigrant women out there, talking about some of you sisters, from the diaspora, they got some brothers out here who's single, another way for you to definitely bridge the gap, start dating and marrying some of these good brothers out here. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of brothers who are more single than some of the women are. Trust me, believe it or not, there's way more men who are single. I see them. They go on trips with us and everything. They're single, don't have nobody. Some of the immigrant women get with them. That's one way of learning of each other's culture, if you're building a family together, right? Now, I know some people maybe have a different idea about that, but I feel that the diaspora should get together. That's the only way you'll learn with each other anyway, right? But we're still going to respect ourselves. We're still going to respect our culture, our lineage, and that's really what's going to go on. So if you're disrespectful, you're going to have a big problem here in America.
Got people that are undocumented, right? And they end up pulling this guy up while he's there with his wife and his child. Okay, so that's where we are. There's 2 children there, as I can see. 2 children.
No,
sir, let's go. Sir, we're not doing this. We're not doing this.
Delincuentes no somos nada, todos nos vamos.
Have a little
No hay
discretion.
ningún problema.
I think this would be a really discretionary moment
seems like
where
a
you
moment
can
for
let them
discretion,
go.
Right.
If there's
No entiendo por qué lo están haciendo, pero todos somos familia y nos vamos todos.
There's 3
No hay problema.
Si no van a deportar, todos.
Entonces ahora no vamos con eso.
Sí, tengo que mostrarlo porque yo no soy. Ok, yo no soy. Ok, está bien. Ok, ¿sí o no? Sí tengo, pero yo no soy ese que está ahí. Yo no soy. No.
Se llama Dani.
Dani.
Nada, no hay ningún problema. No se preocupe.
That's all we need to know is your name. That's it. Okay? We just needed to know your name, and that's it. Okay?
Give us some space, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Stay out of the way, sir. Stay out of the way. Thank you.
Council on the left.
¿Por qué te pones así? No hacemos nada, no te pongas así.
Press the elevator down for me, please.
No te pongas así. Tú no eres delincuente, nosotros no somos delincuentes, no te pongas así.
Tranquilo.
Verga, tenemos de niños aquí, no pasamos nada, que sea lo que Dios quiera, siempre lo he dicho. No somos delincuentes, no tenemos antecedentes, nada. Ellos no pueden culparnos de nada.
Ustedes también.
Ya no ha pasado nada.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
So what I'm getting from this is that there was a case of mistaken identity, it appears, where they thought he was somebody and they had to verify who he was because they thought they were looking for somebody else. Maybe he matched the description. That's what I'm getting from it. And obviously it's very upsetting. This, you're not who they think they are. You're a person who has your paperwork in order. You have your ID and they need to verify that. And wifey was very upset and the kids were upset. And numerous people here, I guess it's at City Hall, were, kind of leaning into it. The person who posted this, and there were multiple posts of this same video, they put a lot of language like how ungodly, how inhumane of ICE and of the police to, harass this good father when he's with his child and his wife, and how were they scaring him? These people got on masks and they're cops and they got on vests and they approach this man and they scare the hell out of him. And what kind of a country do we live in where people are doing this to U.S., doing this to human beings? And this is so, if you don't feel bad about this, what kind of person are you? How are we letting this, happen? And what does that say about those of you who are allowing this to happen? There was all this on the high horse, total collapse onto this issue. And just gaslighting extraordinaire, like throwing everything at the wall about how barbaric it was, how callous America is, yada, 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 yada. And it got to the point, man, but I was pissed off. Everything that you're showing, that you're so appalled about when it comes to ICE, that's been happening to Black Americans forever. That's been happening to us all the time. It's called driving while black. It's called walking while black. It's called being black. Okay, that's what it is. I'm old as hell and I'm still taking my head off in my own car because they still profiling Black people, particularly if you're a young Black man. When I say young, we age so well sometimes it's hard to tell. So basically almost any age until you get a lot of gray in your beard. And even then you might meet fit a subscription or a description. So what I'm saying is, part of what's so frustrating is people are now finally appalled about a problem, and it's only natural. I think it's only human nature for Black Americans to be like, oh, now y'all give a damn. Omari said this. I remember getting off work in my security uniform, minding my own business. Cops following me a few minutes. Later, right before I reached my house, the entire police department had me surrounded, gun drawn. I just had done 12-hour shift, tired as these mofos said my car matched the description in a robbery. Having the wrong license plate wasn't enough. They still had to run all my information, knowing they had the wrong person in the wrong car. They eventually gave a bullshit apology. I sold that car immediately. These immigrants can't survive a day in our shoes. The amount of stress, trauma we've had to endure in such a short amount of time is astronomical. See, what I'm trying to tell you is that there's a lot of resentment in the Black community due to how we've been treated over the years. And when you see another group getting a little taste of what we've been getting all this time, and we see this upheaval, this emotional pearl clutching, people losing their minds, and even worse, we get those same people talking to us like we don't know what it is. Like we don't know what abuse from cops is. Like we don't know what harassment is. Like we don't know what racial profiling is. How dare a Latino or Hispanic person say to Black people in America they racially profiling us? I'm sorry, but it's very difficult
I do not apply for what's happening. I do not clap for you being racially profiled, but I'm saying that's part of the process. At least in your case, it's because some of you are undocumented. They just did it to us hoping they could find something on us. These cops, as Michael Graham from the Reset Race said, these cops are there at these hearings. They're at least following a lead. Man, they just pull up random black people and hope something wrong. Remember that young black man, what was his name? The one that was killed in the car. The one that was killed, he had a license for his gun, and the cop shot him point blank range. Do you know, Philando Castile had been pulled over. They pulled him over so many times for nothing. Just so happens that last time was the last time they pulled him over because they killed him. We don't have to be your magical Negroes that enjoy getting mistreated, and then when you get mistreated, we ready to jump on the grenade for you. You understand what I'm saying? I want to try to use my words. I want to express this. Black Americans, it is inhumane for any group of people, progressive, liberal, what have you, to look at Black Americans and chastise us because you think that we don't have the adequate amount of anger or frustration over this group of people being treated as we've been treated all this time. It is only natural for Black Americans who have been facing this treatment and getting very little focus on it until George Floyd, until Philando Castile, until Trayvon Martin, until someone gets killed that the system can make money off of. Because there's so many other deaths. If every time a Black person was killed by a cop in a routine traffic stop, that became a George Floyd moment or Philando Castile moment, we wouldn't have enough time in the day to cover it. It happens a lot. And what I'm saying is, even those cases when no one's killed, the trauma from that experience. You saw how that Latino man took that? You see how he took that? You see how destroyed he looked? You see his anguish? You see how his wife was reacting? You see the kids? You saw how he was crying in the elevator even after it was over? I've had that same experience getting on the subway train dressed as a contractor in a shirt and tie. The shirt I had on had a company logo on it. I had my tie on, everything. They pulled me over, patted me down, searched me, just cause. I guess they thought I was not who I appeared to be. I should have reacted the way he did, violated, afraid, emasculated, intimidated, emotional. But you know what? I took it like a G. You know why? Because it happened so many times. It happens so many times, it becomes almost like it's just another day. It's just a Wednesday. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, I can tell you time and time again where this has happened to me. So, I want to be clear, man. I'm not rooting for anybody else to go through any hardship. I'm not a sadistic person. But what I'm saying is I want people to look at it from the vantage point of Black Americans who have been going through this shit for such a long time that it seems disrespectful. It'd be one thing if you just talked about it and said, this is wrong what happened to this man. But when you write paragraph upon paragraph, when you are amping it up and you're acting like this is the end of the days, this guy had to show who he was. If every time a Black American had to show who they was to a cop and prove they didn't have a warrant, I don't know where we'd be. White America, I don't know where you'd be. I'm sure you've had the same similar experience as some of you. Maybe more of you. Why is it that what's happening to migrants and immigrants is so appalling, but what's been happening to Americans is no big deal? Yeah, we have a lopsided ass society. It's been that way for a long time. I'm sorry you didn't get the memo, ladies and gentlemen. When we were talking about it, and have been talking about it and living it for the last couple hundred years, I thought maybe you'd have read that in a book somewhere. Maybe y'all need to talk to y'all Congress people about getting some real history put back into the books. Because if you don't know, this is how the cops have been operating up to this point, where you been. They didn't even pull their guns on you. I had cops surround me with guns for less, wearing a uniform, and somebody said, I think I see a black man with a gun. And they just pulling up random black guys at gunpoint. This guy didn't even have guns on his ass. And he looked like he was about to burst into flames. And you know what's sad about it, fam? You know what's sad about it? You know what's sad about it? His reaction is how we all should react. And that's the kicker. We should all react like this, man. This is what you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to be in shock. It's supposed to be traumatic. That's because it's not supposed to happen, right? But when it's happened so many times, and I can report on it, it's not because I haven't been wounded. It's not because we Black Americans haven't been wounded by these types of situations. It's that it's unhealed over. We've been hitting the same spot so many times, it's numb. That's not because we bad people. It's because we've been treated badly so often. For so long, it becomes regular. So when we're having these conversations, fam, when we're talking about this, when we are interacting on social media, and Latinos and Black Americans and non-Black Americans, but people from Africa or from different countries with brown, you're a black skinned person, but you're not a Black American, and you don't understand what's going on with Black Americans, I'm trying to make you understand. I'm trying to provide a little bit of insight to my white friends, to my progressives whose hearts are in the right place. I want you to know how it looks. I want you to see it from my point of view. But then again, if you did see it from my point of view, we wouldn't need to have this conversation, would we? Because you wouldn't be making your sanctimonious long-ass post about how we don't have humanity because we don't feel sad or bad or we're not angry about what's going on. That's it. This could turn into a show by itself. I am not happy to see anybody suffer. I'm not happy to see this man sobbing in fear of losing his family. But that's what's been happening. The separation of families is exactly what's been happening to us forever. And it's happening right now. And it's not being reported on the news. It's not viral. It's not viral unless one of us dies and it's a slow news day. Do you understand? It happens all the time. And if you don't die, it goes nowhere. No one knows about it. But we know about it. We experience it. So when you're talking about empathy, you want other people to have empathy. Why don't we have empathy? Yeah, that's a good question. Why don't we have empathy? I've seen some there's some well-meaning Black folks. They are. There's some very compassionate Black folks, man. They understand suffering and pain, and they've seen so much. They would be the first ones to point out this injustice. They mean well. I personally think it's time for us to go to another level. Besides playing wet nurse to all the problems of other groups. There was a movie that came out. I think it was played by the late Michael Clark Duncan. Remember that? The Green Mile, I think it's called. In the Green Mile, Michael Clark Duncan, this hulking figure, used to absorb all the pain. He could suck all the pain out of a person and make their pains go away. He had this power to absorb all this pain. But in that process, it resided in him. He had to find a way to expel all that pain. Because if he took the pain out of the man, if he absorbed your pain, you no longer had it, but now he held that pain. And then he had to get that pain out. My problem with the current system, the way it's set up in the current hierarchy and the civil rights activists, that's what they want to call themselves, who have been handpicked by the system and by the establishment of the Democratic Party. Black people are not exercising the pain. If that's the problem. I am not your Michael Clark Duncan. I'm not your Bagger Vance. I am not your magical Negro. We want our justice and we want our just due. That's what Black Americans want. And I think Black America is way past tired. We've been tired. It ain't just start with me. I'm just a continuation of many other voices. They want to say that we're callous and we don't. We're unfeeling. Nah, man, we're just abused. That's all. We're just abused and traumatized. That's all. You know? First time, I remember we moved into Landover, Maryland, and I had a roommate, Rick and Tanya. It was this humongous roach. These humongous water bugs. Y'all see these big ass water bugs? And Mrs. Black will be mad that I told you this story. And Mrs. Black is from Petersburg, right? But she is not used to this shit, right? So we're just moving in, and one of these big ass roaches ran, right? It's the look on Mrs. Black, my baby's face, it was like she's about to have, she damn near passed out. And I'm talking about, and Tanya from Southeast. I'm from Southeast originally, right? She said, "Oh, baby, there ain't nothing but a little roach." Pow! And she stepped on that roach and pushed it into the afterlife. And laughed like, "Girl, you all right, calm down. It's just a roach, baby." See, Mrs. Black was not traumatized. Tanya was. She didn't like roaches. She was just used to them. And that, my friend, it's what ICE is. It's what the cops are. It's what you're dealing with. Welcome to the neighborhood. All right, guys, that's all I got. Let me know what
Kofi, follow me.